The man says he is just an inhabitant of planet Earth, a civilized place. While the old man spits blood, a child calls out to the old man, saying that his mother asked him to bring this to him. The old man thanks him, and the child places the bread on the ground and asks him to get better and make more of that soap. With that, the little girl leaves into the snowstorm. And once again he says, I am an inhabitant of planet Earth, someone who came from a civilized world 50 years ago. He doesn't know how, but he ended up in this strange world. He was on his way to a lecture with the company people when they were caught in a landslide. It seemed obvious that everyone had died. However, they woke up in this strange world, in front of a giant fox with 3 tails and a 2-headed snake. Strange people with powers to fly through the skies. It reminded him of some of the novels he read from time to time. Even he, though, having knowledge of this, never imagined that all his colleagues would have a much better life than the one he had. Creatures known as the sages appeared from the skies and were impressed with the talents his friends had, and each of them was taken to different parts of the world and the skies. Only he and Director Kim remained in that place. For some reason, both hoped that, since they also came from another world, something special would eventually happen to them. However, time started to pass, and they realized that neither he nor Director Kim had anything special. All they could do was manual labor to survive. 6 months later, the director said he couldn't continue living like that, gathering some of the money they earned. He bought a basic martial arts book, one of those sold on any street. However, strangely, in just 3 months, he mastered the book and became a martial arts master. He started working for the nation. He learned increasingly advanced martial arts. In a short time, he became a powerful warrior, known throughout the world, while the protagonist was left behind. To this day, he still wonders, was there something special reserved for him? He always believed that. However, time passed and nothing happened. And now, after 50 years, he is just an old man who will die alone from the flu. He tried his best to survive. He learned the language of this place, how to write, how to make money. He bought a small piece of land and built his own house with knowledge of the land. He did things like, for example, making soap to sell and earn money. This world was much less civilized. He knew some concepts that were new here. But man, the martial world here is competitive. His recipe was quickly stolen. The guys who had a lot more money invested in much larger production, and he was pushed out of the market. Only in some other novel would you invent soap and become a billionaire, man. Since then, having just enough to make the minimum money hasn't been easy. Now he's there, waiting for death. After being rejected by this world, he wonders what they expected him to do. He tried his best. So what was the right path? Why was he chosen if he wasn't special? And why did he have to keep living? Only to have everything taken from him at that moment. He didn't even have the energy to keep his eyes open while thinking all he wanted was a little more power or maybe some opportunities. And that's how he died, man. But we can't end everything here. There he is, waking up and looking at his own hand, wondering why he's alive and why he's wearing those clothes. From when he arrived from a land, in front of him is all the staff who work with him with headaches, wondering where they are. That's when it hit him. He came to this world with power, yeah man. The power of regression. Right after that. One of those guys there, right? I think it's that King fellow who mentions they were on the trip. So, how did they end up there? Obviously, this is exactly the first day they arrived. Right after the accident, strangely enough. The moment the Earth crashed, he saw a strange light and opened his eyes there. The problem is, man, that was 50 years ago. It's tough for him to really remember how things worked. Someone is calling from manager's cell, while our boy is there wanting to know, right? What does he do now that he's back? Most regression stories. The person abuses future knowledge. However, all he learned was how to make soap. And he doesn't even remember the past because, well, he ended up living too long in that. The guy who was calling for him shouts calling from Mr. Henry and tells him to look over there and stop ignoring everyone. Man, your boy is going to apologize for not coming. And the dude, out of nowhere, punches him in the face. The girls and the fool are all left speechless. Confused, the guy who called him said he's an idiot, that he must have fallen asleep while driving and made everyone fall into that hole. Apparently, that guy has no idea they actually died, because he says almost everyone died. Friend, let me give you a heads up here. Your Rio, however, had long forgotten that, you know? Nobody even called him manager. That's why. He didn't realize the guy was referring to him. And the guy asks if the less skilled one is trying to lose his job the moment they return. The protagonist recognizes the guy as Session Chief John Miriam, the son of a weightlifting champion. Man, a jerk who didn't even get the position except for being the director's son. Like 32 years living pure nepotism. And the bastard who always made his life difficult. The guy is there giving him hell. While everyone was asking him to calm down, his body began to rise. Remembering that, indeed, on the day he was driving, he was a bit tired. That's because the damn Gene dumped all his work on our boy to handle. Not to mention, he wasn't even supposed to be the one driving. On this trip, the guy was yelling there. Everyone tried to calm him down, while little by little the old man's memories returned. That day in the past, something similar happened. He thought he was the wrong person and kept apologizing. All twisted up, and that's how he kept living. For the next 50 years, always apologizing. Bowing his head, even when the thugs robbed him. He apologized when a martial artist humiliated him. He apologized, but after years and years of such a life, he began to realize that it's necessary to have control over your behavior around people you can't handle. However, there are different situations in this. He called for Boss John and says he knows he's angry. But now is not the time to point fingers at each other. Man, that John guy came and punched him again, giving that classic insult to the mother. Damn, he puffed up his cheek. I thought our boy was going to defend himself. Hold on, he's giving that stare, man. Saying he'll never have to kneel to anyone who can give him family. That cheek slap back, dude. Everyone's mouths wide open. He moves forward, saying that in his past life, he got beaten by countless martial artists countless times. Tom, him, and another earthling, and he remembers, man. The thugs were much more aggressive, and even for gathering herbs in the mountains. He was beaten. The same thing happened. When he didn't pay taxes, son, and now he was there beating the guy up. In this violent world, he managed to gain something that these people, at that moment, they didn't have it. He knew exactly how the human mind worked. The moment you land a punch right in the eye, fear is amplified. After taking a few more hits, only 2 words instinctively come out of his mouth. Right when Joao, all trembling, just throws out the classic line. Sorry about that, the protagonist says. He might not have the mythical talents those heavenly sages seek, or the martial prowess needed to become famous in this world. But he did have the ability to change fate. That fool Gene is over there holding his head, dying in pain while the others call for the master and ask him to calm things down, right, man? How can he beat up his own teammate like that? Our guy already plays the card of being a normal person, saying he lost his temper unintentionally and kind of apologizing there. Manager King says, well, apologizing to them is useless. That John guy might have crossed the line. However, he overdid it by crushing the guy like that. The master knows that, of all people, the only one who will kind of stick with him is the director. Kina then kind of agrees with the guy. This dude will become one of the strongest martial artists as soon as he starts learning. So he has to support this guy and stay close. Obviously, all of this was the plan. For now, he goes up to Joao and apologizes, saying he really overreacted. Joao wants to say something, son. But with just one glare, he already turns around shitting himself, which makes the forest a bit wet, you know? And says they have to get out of this place and kind of find a village. Something like that, you know? That's the logical thing to do. However, it's a shame logic doesn't work in this world. This was the world of immortals, man, where everyone is trying to secure their own immortality. And the only rule in this place is that the strong devour the weak. Anyone in this world with a sword in hand will fight for fame and honor. The name of this forest is the Path of Ascension. Unfortunately, there's no nation, village, or anything nearby. He calls it a little pig and says the sun will set soon. So, maybe they should camp somewhere safe. The guy agrees, saying he's right, but wants to know, where's that car of theirs that was full of supplies? If they could get that, survival would be easy. Our boy already knows it's a shame. However, that car won't be found at all. The problem is they won't believe it. If he says that, he might try to convince those guys that the car can't be found, or he has another plan. He says the best idea for now is to split up. One team looks for the car, while the other sets up camp. That way, they cover both chances since it's a logical decision. Everyone ends up agreeing, and night falls. Obviously, they didn't find it and made a campfire. The blue-eyed girl, whose name I still don't know, wants to know where the car is. They had a landslide, so where did it go? Everyone says no one has a clue. She's asking the wrong person. Everyone there is lost. The group is eating some nuts there, which are kind of tasty. The old man says he found another path, so they don't need to worry. Except for Genetics, who says the situation is pretty tough. However, thanks to him, things aren't getting that complicated. From the company, He already knew he was someone they could count on. Now, he remembers he was probably pretty tired, since on day one he dumped all the work on the boy. The other one with yellow eyes says that indeed. The manager was always very diligent. The damn girls are praising him. Too bad, he already knows those bitches will abandon him, man. In his past life, the old man only found this cave after hours and hours of walking through the night. Now, he says it was luck that he found this place, while thinking he has to make the most of this short moment, because this is the last night they'll be able to laugh like this. Shortly after, under the moonlight, he's trembling, saying he welcomes the Lord of the Forest. A three-tailed wolf in front of him says the boy has a very strange scent for a human. He's lived over 1,000 years and has never smelled anything like it. At that moment, the people waking up in the cave came outside, and everyone was scared too, remembering. The Lord orders everyone to kneel and show respect to the Lord of the Forest. This wolf says every time he meets a human, he remembers why they're idiots and rude. He would have torn off everyone's limbs by now. However, it seems one of them knew how to respect the forest, and that's why they would be forgiven. But having said that, they were on the Lord of the Forest territory and must pay the price. So, one of them would have to offer an arm to stay there. Soo-hyun remembers his past life. No one knew what to do when this creature appeared, and they started screaming. Desperate, the wolf then took everyone's limbs. Man, they were almost dead, at least this time. The fox seemed to appreciate how he acted with the creature, licking itself. Want to know who's going to give an arm? The lore, man. You've seen in the past life, everyone lose all their limbs. So, it wasn't that bad. A single arm from one person was little. Besides, those guys will suddenly show up and heal everyone. That's how they survived. Not to mention, knowing something like this could happen. He even prepared an herb there that helps reduce the pain. And with that, it's a matter of grit and courage. He says he offers his arm. Everyone is shocked, and the fox can't resist. In a second, it goes and bites it. Even the Lord pulled the boy's arm. Everyone feels the pain there. He agonizes. He goes to get the herb and starts eating it while crying in pain. Desperate, well then. He says he thought the taste would be different because of the smell. But really, he was identical to any human. Actually, it was even worse. Because he seemed to have very impure veins, his relief was over. He apologizes for the offering not being good enough, but then the fox turns around and says it would let them stay 7 days in this territory and no one there would die. Thanks to her divinity in this forest, she jumps and leaves. And in the group's memory, she keeps calling for the master, asking if he is okay. He says yes and asks for help in the cave, since he was the first to find the fox. He said he talked to her before they arrived and learned a bit about this world. He reveals that they're no longer on Earth, and at this, everyone is scared, saying they never imagined something like this would happen. But considering they saw a three-tailed fox, right? So, reality is sinking in for the boys, and our boy is struggling with his arm, saying at least they're safe for a week because of what he did. The group wants to know, right, what happens after that week. He said they will have to give something else. Everyone is desperate, but he only says he is exhausted and needs to rest. He hopes everyone understands. Night falls. And apparently, John said something because everyone is against him. The protagonist is listening to the guy asking who will give an arm and a leg. In a week, the guy with the Adidas outfit says even so, they can't just give up on him like that. He was very useful and was the one who found the place, right? And he even gave his arm. John says it's good to make the most of his presence, right, man? And then discard him. He already lost an arm anyway and won't last long. But while John is making his plans, meanwhile, the boys are there without an arm, stuffing the orikama in their pocket from what he heard the guys talking about. Looks like they want to keep him locked up for the whole week, one of his crew says. Right, man? He's got one hell of a big guy backing him up there, saying he wasn't too thrilled about it, but with the violence he's learned. Over the last 50 years, kid, it would be easy to take down a John for sure. Missing an arm, the guy stands there with his back turned, talking. While he's debating whether to kill or not, he takes a deep breath. He drops the stone and says that for now, fear must be kind of clouding everyone's judgment at this moment. And if he's too cruel, it'll only mess up the future relations. He needs to build with Director Kim. Then he hears someone telling Joao to shut up, or they'll break his legs. You realize that, even though Joao is full of plans, he still has people on his side. Night falls, and another day comes, man. Unlike the fox that ate an arm, the two-headed snake that showed up only asked for a little blood. That same snake, in its past life, sucked their blood itself. The poor guys don't have any limbs, right? No feet, no arms. This time, the guy named Tiff offers his little arm for a quick suck. and she gave a little lick and left. That's because the human's blood this time was the worst she'd ever tasted, kid. She didn't want any more. You know, she didn't like it because that guy's blood was soaked in alcohol and nicotine, kid, plus the boy's cholesterol. So he tells John Ming to meet up with him to get some herbs. It's kind of disrespectful to call the guy by his full name, but you just ask if he's hungry or not. The guy says yes, right? So he tells him to come quickly because he's going to explain which herbs are edible. He's already planning to give his arm to the fox next week too. So if he dies, he needs someone like him who knows what's going on. Joao, is they're all awkward, right? That's exactly his plan. And he says it's good to know that and thanks him for sharing the info. But you know very well, man, the fox isn't coming back. And this guy won't even have a chance to get that information. In the next scene, he's tearing into that fool John, asking how many times he has to tell him not to pick the wrong herb. The guy is there, all apologetic. And our boy said that, apparently, he's trying to kill him. Everyone keeps giving the guy a hard time, man, taking the chance to get revenge from their past life. One day I tried to explain that he needs a break, man. He's been digging for those herbs nonstop. But you know that bastard, man, would do anything to oppose it. From the very first day, he was in the company, and all he did was tell him to get back to work. Right after, they have to finish this before sunset. Sometime later, John manages to find a giant ginseng in his hand. He asks if this thing is really normal. And our guy says, well, it seems like it is. Obviously, these guys have no idea that this is actually a yellow bamboo root. Maybe it's because they're in the Ascension Forest, which is full of energy. Normally, that thing grows to the size of a little finger, man. But in a place like this, it's different. It's not very useful for those who rely on spiritual energy. But for those who use physical strength, it's perfect. Let's see that the gathering is going well. John gets excited, man. Already wants to know how much more they're going to find. Sometime later, looking at the horizon, I knew the time was coming. A bright explosion happened in the sky. John hit the ground face first. Everyone is groaning with their hands on their heads. What's going on? Some guys appear in the sky, saying it's a surprise to find so many talented people. The one in the yellow cloak orders the bio to consume them because they belong to him. The guys are all arguing there, while Kim wants to know who they are. What's happening? The cloak. Black comments that only 3 of them had spiritual roots, and the rest looked like normal mortals. He stretches out his hand, making a golden orb. And John just keeps having an attack there, man. The old man looks excited, saying the boy really has the power of the golden human thunder. The woman with black lipstick, who I can't even name, man, says it's her turn now and starts playing a little tune. At that moment, the blue-eyed boy begins to agonize, screaming desperately while the other one celebrates, saying he found a perfect immortal root. The buff guy puts his hand on the chief's shoulder and rolls, saying he has a sacred body. He would be taken as Azura's disciple. The guy clearly looks a bit scared, not knowing what to say, while feeling the pressure from the dude with the black lipstick. He says maybe he'd do better in the Ghost Valley, a perfect place to seek immortality and dominate the heavens. They all seem to be arguing over who's going to take the kid, while, you know, Kim is kind of confused about everything that's happening. Suddenly, the guy in the golden cloak pulls out a little jar and drags Joao inside, saying humans are too indecisive and he's going to lead him on the path of ascension. Regardless of that, a buff human sees that our boy lost his arm to the fox, you know, and says he's really brave. He could be just any mortal, but he really was quite a kid. The old man thanks him, but even those guys are already leaving, saying their job here is done. They should enjoy that this forest will be safe for 10 years now. They pass through here in desperation. I try to say they need help because they don't even know how to get out of this place. But the guys left, you know, man. In the past life, he screamed and screamed, but was ignored like an insect. So it's not even worth it, at least. Just like everyone's body was restored in the past life. This time he recovered his arm, but you know what? What are they going to do to survive in a forest like this? Strangely, the cluster of stars seems to be moving in a certain direction. He wonders why. The next day, inside the cave, the girl there is suffering, coughing up blood. The other one, dressed in green, whom I've noticed probably isn't important, because so far I don't know their names, she comments, right? That the friend in pink clothes is feeling unwell, right? What do we do? The man just asks to wait a little longer. Maybe someone will show up to heal her, right? It would be quite a coincidence. The others find it a bit strange. However, right then, someone enters the cave and says they're suffering in this place. They were like ants trying to defeat a dragon. King asks who he is, and the guy introduces himself as the Sea Dragon King, the Dragon King of the Sea. The Sea King, Dragon. Sea King, Dragon. Sounds good, huh? I think it's him. He mentions something about controlling the storm and says he saw it was raining here. That's why he arrived at this place. The girl lying on the ground somehow used some kind of magic to create that. He finds it strange because she looks like a normal woman. So how did she have so much power? Besides, she wasn't consciously manipulating time, which was even stranger. The man says they're the ones who are confused. They haven't been here long, and powerful people keep showing up. Like him all the time, because it seems they are taking his companions. Tato Ruan laughs and says that apparently some colleagues have already arrived there and saw potential in the group. It's almost ironic that now, conveniently, he has also been appearing in front of this woman. Exactly. He asks if the mortal understands where he is. This was a place known as the Path of Ascension, the perfect gateway to the higher world, and in a few months, the Ascension Gate would open there. It happens once every 1,000 years. Because of that, countless creatures and people gather in this place to try to pass through this gate, and that's why there are so many strange people. It's appearing in this place. The gentleman said he understood. Meanwhile, the one who wants to know isn't. Why did they take the rest of the friends to that whole cult business? Real says it's really hard for a mortal like him to understand. For people in this world, it was common to have magic to increase or decrease the size of things, and probably the guys who took his friends have their entire cult and their group inside one of those objects. Their plan is to cross the gate, carrying everyone, including himself, inside that object. The Sea Dragon's castle is stored there. More than 8,800 dragons were sleeping. Now, I don't know if they mean actual dragons or dragon members, right? Because he says the girl is quite peculiar, and if she joined the group, she would have the chance to become something extraordinary. He asks him to wait, saying he can't just take the girl like that. However, suddenly he just drops to his knees and, man, his eye's about to pop out of his head. Real just says he will give his blood to her and accept her as part of the group. That was the best solution for everyone there. Besides that, he advises him never to get in the way of people's intentions in this world. Damn, dude. The boy is about to explode his head, and our poor protagonist still got caught in the crossfire. Roy leaves saying he's being merciful, but most people would have killed him with a thunder strike on the spot. He flew out a dragon in style the next day. Right, man? Everyone was kidnapped. Except for that one whose name we still don't know, man. She's laughing like a madwoman, saying this world is a mess. With dragon stuff, friends being taken, people flying. What the hell is this? That would probably be my reaction too, and yours, right? You go over and gently tell her to calm down. She, however, just asks our boy not to be taken too. She wouldn't survive alone in this forest. Wow, kid, but he only thinks it's a shame. But their time is up. Suddenly, she starts to agonize. She puts her hand on her head and says something is coming. A king rushes to help, but she says it's too late, and whatever it is came out of nowhere. An old man appears on a mechanical lion. Anaha looks to the sky. That one just left the PT chat. And the old man wants to know how mortals exist on this path. However, he comes to his own conclusion, saying the place is in chaos. Because of the gate opening, that must be how they got there. Now he wants to know which mortal emitted that vast consciousness. He felt a strong presence, like one of the sages from the higher realms, descending to earth, and for some reason, he believes it's the girl. The old man asks the elder to stay there, wanting to know who he is, and warns that she is one of their own, but the old man just gives him a look, and once again, the director is the one attacked. Poor guy, man. Every time he shows up, he gets hit, my boy. Luckily, our boy softened the blow so the guy wouldn't die. But, oh man, his back got torn up. And the old man, nothing unusual, went over, grabbed the girl's face, and said the child will go with him. She might not have a strong foundation, but with the talent she has for consciousness, he can awaken her power. She's crying, calling for the two, but the guy says it's best she abandons those connections to the world, especially now that he's already made this offer. That's right, the two are flying, and it looks like he's going to kill, right, to force her to accept. She, however, said she'll accept if he doesn't kill. Right, man, better that way. The old man says it's best she forget all the connections she has with the world. And she says it's fine. He releases the two. But suddenly he aims in their direction, saying that if he lets them live, she'll stay connected forever. Phew. He opened a portal there, right? For them to return to a nearby humble town. Humble, huh? The other guys who came didn't even do right by the kids. It's understandable since they didn't have many options either. Actually, they got sucked into that business over there, kid. And through the little ring of the gentleman. Strangers, I'll hear the girl calling for them. But goodbye, kid. The two wake up in the middle of an abandoned place. Hearing people selling writing, selling cloth in some place called Manhwa. The gentleman opens his eyes in the alley and wonders exactly where he is. Ah, past life, he didn't fall into this place then. Unfortunately, he doesn't know it. Apparently, that old man told the truth, right? He threw them into a random place. However, for some reason, he still felt like this was somewhat familiar. Shielding his eyes from the sun, he finally recognizes the place where he once lived for a while. The famous capital of Wangu, the city, Scu Kyung. From what I understand so far, our boy has no power at all, except for the fact that he can regress. So, the competition between the talented and the boy, who goes back in time shortly after. Kid, they're still talking in the alley, and the old man says he can't take it anymore. Kid, it's still crazy. The gentleman comments that he feels the same way, and wishes he could wake up as if it were all a dream. The poor old man, scratching his good hair a bit, says now they're screwed. Only the two of them are left. At least maybe they should feel relieved, right? But they weren't taken by those monsters. Yours, however, doesn't think the same way. He may have gone back to the past, but remembers that following this path, kid, he was nothing more than an herb collector who got beaten every day. He already says that, whatever the future holds, they can't stay stuck in this alley forever, so right? At least they have to get out of there. The city is vast, people going back and forth. But kid, he doesn't understand anything these guys are talking about. It seems like everyone is commenting about them since they're kind of being stared at. But he has no idea what the old man says they are talking about. But the clothes they are wearing are funny. Ah, everyone around is speaking Chinese, but they are both Korean, right? So the guy is kind of confused. But the old man says he learned Chinese when he was younger. The old man, however, seeing the boys torn back, is more worried about that than the fact that he speaks two languages. And the bastard lied, man, they're not even speaking Chinese. The symbols look kind of similar, but the sounds are completely different. Flashback. He spent 2 months being ragged on by beggars, just to start understanding what these guys were saying, but now there's no reason to worry about that. He says first it's time to get new clothes, but the guy's already sure, right? How are they going to manage if they don't have money or even communicate properly? But the bastard went to an herb shop and threw that fat ginseng root into the old man's hand, who was shocked. He immediately warned that this yellow bamboo root was over 800 years old, so it's worth paying a good price. The old man instantly offers 15 silver ingots. I think it's bars, right, man? Man, that sounds like a lot. Even the old man is shocked. It seems like in his past life, he never managed to save that much money. I thought he was going to haggle to get a better deal, right? But the bastard was a broke beggar, man. He just accepted it. Shortly after, they're already in a huge mansion where our boy seems to have rented. Bought it. And he already tells the old man, who's going to teach him the language of this place? It seems like everything went really well and easy. But that, man, is the power of money. The problem is that to get this house, more fake IDs for both of them, and nice clothes. He spent almost everything. Only a little silver was left for him. And the director can't stop noticing that the boy's back is still bloody. Kid, take care of that. It'll get infected and you'll have to reincarnate again because of it, huh? He says he's going to stop calling our boy manager, right? And said that from now on, he'll be his. And a little later, he explains that the reason they managed to get all that money was because of those herbs. The problem is they'll run out of money when a reserve is gone. So, the first and most important thing is to find a way to earn money consistently. Mr. King already thinks they can sell the rest, gather some cash, and start a business. You know, kid, that guy used to run a relatively big company, so it's not a bad strategy. It'll be enough for them to live, but living isn't enough for him anymore. He went back in time, kid, and in this life, he's going to dream big. He knows that, besides that, Mr. King is a martial genius. By reading some cheap street books, kid, he managed to become a master in a few months. Shortly after, he learned some more advanced techniques and became one of the greatest masters in this world. But what if this guy learned the advanced techniques right from the start? Maybe he could anticipate the birth of the most powerful swordsman this world has seen in at least 30 years. Obviously, with that, he'll benefit to the fullest. While he's close to him, then he calls the director and comments that in this world, he seems to be realizing that the thing called martial arts is pretty important, considering that if they start some kind of business and have any success, they'll need to know how to defend themselves. A director who says he's heard of this thing, but as far as he knows, Martial arts are only taught to those who belong to a sect. How are they going to learn? Our boy already realizes that the guy knows a bit about the martial world. He's not completely clueless. That explains why there are 7 famous sects in this city. There are the Demon Slayers, the Blind Sect. No way I'm going to say the name of the 7th one that we'll never remember. But it looks like I'm going to have to talk like this because the Demon Slayers sect uses sword and blade techniques. There's the Buddhist temple, right? That fights kind of with those Karate Kid moves. There's the Hall sect, which is the Brave Intelligence Group. And the 7 Mysteries sect. Oh, it seems like 3 of these are demon sects. And not much is known beyond the fact that they are proficient in witchcraft. And obviously, they do a lot of illegal stuff. He asks which one or who he seems to like the most. Who answers that he obviously likes the Demon Slayer sect. A true master in a place like this has to use a sword and learn blade techniques. The 5th is impressed. He didn't even need to convince this guy to follow exactly the same path he took in his past life. What he wants to know, though, is how he already knows all this. Our boy said that when he was negotiating and getting the identities, he saw some guys talking, and man, we had our first time skip of 3 months. In front of such a sight, the guys asked what they're doing there. I think our dear sky is a river over there on the left, right? Who says he brought his older brother there, who is interested in learning martial arts. The Rock dressed like Goku doesn't seem very excited about it, no? However, he came because the guy's clothes must mean they have a good amount of money. They're needed. Even so, he apologizes and says that learning martial arts at that age would be almost impossible. Our dear self insists, asking to at least see someone from the high ranks, right? Man already dropping that coin. Sometime later, already inside the sect, someone wants to know if they just want to learn to defend themselves. Our boy brought a feast of silver coins and says yes. That's all they want. The moment the old man sees the money, he says it's all right. They can be external disciples. However, it's good for them to know that there is no special treatment for those who enter through donation. Besides, they were only going to accept one of the 2. Kim is going to complain about that. However, at the moment, our guy accepts, saying it's perfect for them. The guy is already leaving, saying it's fine. So, just go meet him there and join the disciples. Kim asked our guy if it's right that only he is learning the martial art. He would have chosen a different group if he had known it would be this expensive. Our guy tells him not to worry. He was never really good at sports either, man. Meanwhile, he's going to handle the business. Kim goes and learns the martial arts. The old man thanks him, but says he's not sure if he'll really be able to learn much. Our guy tells him to trust himself and try before judging. Another time skip, 7 months later. At the competition inside the sect, a human on the throne wants to know where this guy came from. Obviously, right, man? It's Lord King, who crushed all the disciples who have been in the sect for years. Mastering a martial art means understanding its true meaning and aligning your body with it. Someone with low knowledge, at best, becomes a 3rd-tier warrior. And to advance beyond that point, you need more and more knowledge. The guys attack, saying he's an outsider and will never beat them. Obviously, more knowledge means you invested more time and also work harder. However, some people had enough talent to laugh in the face of all that knowledge stuff. They had enough talent to advance through countless stages at once. The Demon Slayers sect is already famous for having numerous members like that. But for the first time, someone from outside appeared and killed all those great disciples. In just 7 months, Director 15 became a 1st-tier warrior who had mastered it. Absolutely all the techniques from that place. The old man bit his tongue. He doesn't know, man, for someone to evolve that fast, they would need to gather countless martial artists to support it. Not to mention that this guy is an outsider who never had any contact with martial arts. So how did this happen? It was as if the very tradition of that place had knelt before this man. Damn, man. And gave the order for me to capture him. Then our boy, man, already imagined an outsider dominating that place in 7 months. He left everything in chaos because of it. The guys are accusing him of being a spy, but even while in prison, the bastard is still training. What you don't understand is why he's also locked up, man. He doesn't know anything about martial arts. But now he's there alongside the fool. Our boy asks if the director isn't worried. Man, a lot of people suspect he's a spy. Normally, in these kinds of stories, they destroy his martial arts, cut off an arm somehow, and stop him from fighting. The director, however, replies that he already knows about that. But for some reason, he feels that continuing to train is the only way to get through the next barrier. And inside him, he already knew that after passing this one, he'd advance to the next stage. You know how incredible it is to be a first-class warrior. It's impressive, but advancing beyond that is something only the sect masters can do. That was already the level where, at most, there are 1,000 men with that strength in the world. Not to mention that after that, the only thing left is the peak, where basically, you're untouchable in the moment. Are you sure this guy will be at the top of the world? No, in 30 years earlier than he imagined, but about 40 years faster. 7 days later, there's Manager King, with little flowers flying around him, absorbing energy, and you already know what that means. That only appears in martial artists and reaches the next level of the peak. Yes, the one who stands up announcing he has crossed the barrier. And now he was no longer afraid of the leader of this sect, our boy praises, saying his talent exceeds what he expected. The old man says he is also impressed with himself. He never imagined he had such talent. Maybe it was because, when he was a child, he read countless martial stories. Right then, some guys run in warning that the time has come. They had received orders from the leader to destroy his energy core, because now they're sure he is the cursed one of the demonic sect. King glares. Our boy, tries to calm everyone down, saying he already confessed that no one there is a spy. The guy just tells him to shut up and punches him in the face. A guy warns that he already heard them talking in that code language and is sure they are not honest people. However, then the little guy draws his sword, gives it to him, and takes a cut on his hand. The cut was so precise that he didn't cut off the hand, but disarmed the guy. And the bald guy warns that he already made it clear that this was his first acceptance. The Rock Goku comes to stab with his sword. But the guy, within seconds, everyone had taken the same slap on the hand and dropped their swords. Everyone is already running desperately through the corridors, saying that strangely he seemed to be at the peak of martial arts. The guy. Then King calls our boy and tells him he's going to other cities to train and wants to know what he will do. Our boy, not dumb, says he will follow him. Sons could go, for example, for the unorthodox acceptance of the dragons. The old man says he will meet him there, the guy, and the next scene is already at the top of the mountain. And damn, man, this Kim guy is already soaked in blood there. He asks why it took so long for himself. And one laughs, saying the director is a little faster than him. Man, noticing how the sword is, he already knows that this guy, he wasn't a violent person at all. However, this world had already changed him. It would be a dream if one day he could return to the peaceful life on Earth. If he could choose to go back somewhere, it would be there, man. He's tired of the violence in this world. However, none of that matters, because now he's here and will do whatever it takes to survive. After being betrayed by the first sect, they invaded the dragon's house, man, and took over everything. 2 years later, they ventured into the Wangu region and kept defeating countless sects. It was in the 3rd year that all the emblems of all the sects had already been cut by him in a short time. In that region, he was named the strongest martial artist under the heavens, and he used that fame to unite sects and form an alliance, man. 7 years later, we're making progress here. He and the director were close like brothers. Ignoring the age difference between them, they even managed to work on a martial art. Specifically for our boy, Mr. Kim hands him the book and says the technique's name is the Mountain Cutter. He had created this, thinking about our boy's talent, and is sure he can reach the peak. The gentleman seems impressed with that technique. Indeed, it was above any other he had ever seen. The only problem is obviously expected, right, man? He had absolutely no talent. He was learning from the most powerful martial artist under the heavens, who created a martial art specifically for him and only for him. And even so, he barely managed to become a 3rd-tier warrior. After a whole year practicing it, he says, man, that maybe there's no path, no? He has talent in medicine, and, apparently, that's the way to live life. Every person has talent in different areas, and with that, on the first day, after a decade had passed, he glimpsed the level he had only heard about in legends, the 5 energies of the world. Merging into a single person, the old man's body started to twitch. What the heck? His hair grew long and black. The old man calls out to the young uncle. Suddenly, the guy looks handsome, with long hair and muscular. Next chapter, our boy. You say the guy looks younger than him. The other replies that he really feels full of life, like he could do anything. Our boy congratulates him, saying the world will be shocked by this skeletal reconstruction. The other stands up and says he will have to pass the Martial Alliance succession to someone else. Then, our boy wants to know who he has in mind. And the guy says there are some talented people, but no one truly understands the essence of the martial art. That's his argument. Right, man? That he's the only extraordinary guy. To the point of really knowing what it is. If he's expecting to find another genius like him, it's going to be tough. Okay? However, looking out the window, he says that even trying to lower expectations, there is no one worthy, man. We jump forward 15 more years. It's been 35 years since our boy started his life on the path of ascension, and now he's 65 years old. Man, he's curious to know what Kim is doing 1 year after the skeletal reconstruction. He passed the leadership position to someone else and left. He wanted to retire with that guy, but man, he had to stay here to handle the strategic part of the alliance. Kim said he would like to travel much more around this world. Maybe that's why he couldn't come to our boy's retirement ceremony. He's walking through the garden, saying this place is too quiet and still. He is walking through the garden, saying that this place is too quiet and still. He bought this beautiful mansion with the money he earned from retirement. The only downside was that it was too big and he was all alone in it. There's someone out there in the middle of the woods, and when he sees him, he takes a look. The guy was king, right? I still haven't gotten used to him with long hair. But the boy wants to know where he was and why he only showed up now. However, he just falls backwards onto the grass and calls out to Ryum. And he says he really believed it, that he was blessed in martial arts. Mr. Hyun says it's obvious he is, right, man? If he's not a genius, then who would be? His friend answers yes. In this world of ordinary mortals, he really wasn't ordinary. The protagonist laughs. Of course, he wasn't ordinary. But then he says he fought against a true practitioner. One of those from 35 years ago, like that guy who flies and took the friends. Sir, you know these guys don't reveal themselves easily. They're like shadows controlling the whole world. Through the darkness, and according to the martial alliance they created, they kept gaining more and more power. These guys started wanting to influence everything. No one could stop them. That's because opposing them was like opposing the nation itself. And that's why any rule they gave was obeyed. That's why Kim left this place. He wanted to fight these guys as an individual, and not as a master because, that could affect the alliance. He then explains that they were extremely hard to find. However, he located one. Most of them, they ignored him, saying that he wasn't worthy of a fight because he was mortal. They all disappeared, used illusions, and none of them wanted to fight. But 5 years ago, he finally got a duel. Ryum asks if he won, and the guy says he did, man. The protagonist praises and thanks him, right, for not being a leader and doing that. Otherwise, they would have paid a price, he then says. It's just that he put his whole life on the line fighting this guy. And all he managed to do was a small cut on the tip of his finger. The truth is, the guy made a bet. If he could make at least a tiny cut, he would in theory win, right? So, that's kind of how he was considered the winner. The narrator laughed. Someone immediately said this guy must be one of the top 10 strongest. Something like that. However, unfortunately, that wasn't the case, man. He was actually at the level of one of the weakest compared to mortal martial artists. This guy was basically like someone at the second stage. Extremely basic. You say it's impossible. He already knew that, in his past life, these guys were ridiculously powerful creatures. But he's sure Kim is someone who reached the peak of humanity. He could deliver countless cuts while seeming to float and remain untouchable. This guy in front of him was a genius. So how? Did he only manage to cut the tip of a random cultivator's finger? And here's the thing. The narrator says he lived his whole life like a frog in a well. They don't stand a chance against these guys who are basically walking natural disasters. But he still has something to say. Today he cut the hand of one of them, man. Our excited boy asked if he won. He said no. The guy put a talisman on his hand, which regenerated it, and that's the problem. Now, he realizes he has reached the limit of martial arts. And today he's there to say goodbye to our boy. That's because, after seeing his willpower and training, the guy said he would accept him. Not just accept him as a martial artist, but he would start the path of cultivation. Man, you say it's impossible to become a cultivator. It means abandoning mortality. However, something like that can only be done if the person has a spiritual root. So what explains that skeletal transformation of his? It's basically him reaching the same level of talent as a cultivator. Someone genius like him was born who had to train his whole life to at least reach the level those guys had. Man, he just swings a cut in the air and says he's leaving crazy. He's literally entering another planet. Man, saying he's going to leave the last gift. for our boy before he can respond. He already grabbed the scroll. The guy disappeared with the manuscript. It was a record of how to transcend and achieve cultivation through martial arts. The master, however, wanted to know where his friend was going without him, and with that, time passed once again. There he is. Theo coughing, saying this world is cruel. It's been 50 years since he arrived in this world. Yet there he is again, dying from some random flu, just like in the past life. Fate seemed like something a human, no matter how much, couldn't escape. In the end, the only thing that changed was the house and the clothes. However, he died on exactly the same day. He's sure he lived life to the fullest. He didn't want to have any regrets, unlike in the past life. So, he kept himself busy to the max, studied to the max, practiced to the max, and never even worried about marriage or normal things. It was because of this that he managed to unite all the martial sects in the region. He gained fame, wealth, and everything the mortal world had to offer. So, why now at this moment? Did he feel empty? Could it be that if he and Kim had tried even harder, they would have reached the heavens? Unfortunately, this body of his won't find that answer. All he could feel was a deep sense of helplessness, truly. It was another life full of disappointments. This marked the end of the second regression and the arrival of the E. And you remember that in the last chapter, it ended at the moment he died in the second regression. However, it's no surprise, he woke up in the same forest. However, it's not surprising. He woke up in the same forest. The path of ascension and the body were filled with energy. That is, his regression wasn't just a one-life thing. At that moment, that bastard with brown hair came to slap him again, calling him a son of a bitch. However, this time, the Lord just easily dodged. The guy was trying to hit something no matter what. But the Lord kept wondering why he had regressed. He had a new body, yet he was full of energy. Clearly, a new chance should be something good. But what about the things I built over the last 50 years? My brother kept cursing, saying he was a bastard, that he almost killed everyone, and still had the nerve to keep dodging like that. But the Lord just kept staring, wondering if this was really something good. And soon he says no. Actually, this power he received was more of a curse, one that denied him the meaning of life. Of course, some regressions would be wonderful, and they would be thankful for this chance. But what if he gets stuck in it forever? He would be trapped in the wheel of fate, forced to suffer until the end of time. Not to mention that he no longer knows anyone from the people he met in his past life. That's because in front of him now are completely different beings who, even though they carry the same appearance, they're not the same as before. Not at all. Yoon Hunk is a person he built. The brother of that guy no longer exists in this world because Yoon Hunk was his friend. He went through countless experiences that shaped him. With that, he tells John to calm down and asks what getting angry like that will help. The dude is saying he's a son of a shameless bitch, but the Lord just reveals that it was Minga who should have been driving. However, the protagonist was forced to drive, even after a bad night's sleep since the dam. Manhwa also dumped a ton of work on him. Besides that, who could possibly dodge an avalanche on such a narrow street? He'd better stop pointing fingers and start thinking about what they can do. The fool is there, exhausted and gasping, unable to argue anything. Meanwhile, the prototype calls the director and says he'll look for a place for them to stay before the sun sets. Everyone should go look for the car, or some way out of the forest once night begins to fall. He's going to light the campfire. Everyone should head in that direction. Kyle, the protagonist, wonders if it's worth connecting with these people in any way. As always, he'll end up alone in the end. Back in the cave, the campfire was lit, and everyone is sleeping on the ground. Are you now afraid of this so-called eternal regression? Anyway, the only thing that could give his life meaning was for this ability to be removed. Maybe it would disappear if he returned to Earth, realizing how he always returns to this moment before the path of ascension. But how does he get to Earth? He remembers the old man with the monocle, saying that when the path of ascension opens, the space around destabilizes, and they, as ordinary humans, might have gotten trapped in the spatial variation. At that moment, the prototype imagines that this opening of the ascension gate must be related to the fact they were thrown into this world. Maybe there's a way to use that as well, to make him return. The problem is that, first, he needed to get stronger, since as an ordinary human, he couldn't achieve anything or force anything to happen. He had to become as powerful as Yonhwa was in his past life, with a longer lifespan and capable of experiencing more things. Maybe he can research how to access this so-called path. The goal is now clearer. He had to get stronger to be able to access this path of ascension. The next morning, he is eating that same root to strengthen himself. However, now that he knows how to use plant energy, he can concentrate in his core, something that would have been impossible in his past life. He begins practicing the dragon vein technique, which honor made for him. And with that, he starts breaking the energy blockages in his body. The only downside is that his body is still full of stress and waste from his past life and from the earth's food. Sometime later, he's kind of sanding a piece of wood to stop making a spear. He gives it a few strokes with a scotch tape back and forth and realizes it's worse than before. That's because at the end of his life, he stopped practicing since he was old. And now his skills are kind of weak, but with a glance at the tree, a whip with the wood, and he makes a cut, even though his skills were rusty. They were growing, and now it was only a matter of time since he remembered a lot. However, Manager Kim sees this right away and wants to know how he did something like that, man. How did he make a cut with a twig and cut a tree? The gentleman takes a curious look while thinking that the guy who will help him become powerful has arrived. He then asks if Director Kim wants to learn. The damn bald guy doesn't find anything suspicious and just says, "Yes, man. My friend, you just arrived from Earth. You should find it strange that this kid is tearing a tree apart." But the scene shifts to the usual. The fox approaches, saying humans are disgusting and bold to be in her forest. The gentleman lived so long that he even forgot this damn thing would show up in the first and second lives. All he can do is take the bite, blood spurting, and the fox taking the arm. He blocks some points just to lose less blood and feel less pain. But there was nothing he could do. People ask where he's going, but the protagonist just walks calmly toward the fox, knowing that in this third regression, he was also weak. The truth is that in the second life, he swore he would make it, at the level of convergence of the 5 energies. However, even after hundreds of years training with the most powerful martial artist, he barely managed to reach the first level. The truth is his martial talent is irrelevant compared to the people around him. Wow. He would tear off his own arm helping everyone and says that no matter how he is, no matter if he was weak, whether it took a millennium or 10,000 years, he would not give up. The fox licks its lips and says he is interesting. A human who knows his place and knows how to sacrifice himself. Since that's the case, she's going to try what he's offering. The Lord stares, thinking he will keep giving that arm, until eventually the day comes when he will be stronger than her. As always, after eating the arm, the fox left them there, not caring about the rest of the team. He kept practicing in the forest. The only time he stopped training was when the zero-gravity team arrived and took the friends away. As soon as they left, he went back to practicing without eating or resting. He only finally stopped on the 4th day, where he introduced himself as an inferior mortal, and said he wanted to ask something to the sea dragon, the so-called Rou. What is it, Horn One? Want to know why the curiosity? Or else say that the girl he's taking had her spiritual root trapped, meaning she couldn't practice. Not to mention that, being a mere mortal, she would live at most 100 years. So, why would he be taking her? The Horn One replies that he is too informed for a mortal, but there's no need to worry. When she accepts his blood, she will awaken a spiritual root and receive talents immediately. The Lord gets excited and asks if he could also receive an opportunity like that. They were all from the same lands, and maybe they had some special power he might be interested in. However, he just smiles and tells him to listen. At that very moment, the gentleman feels some pain in his chest, and the guy says it's good for him to know that to stay alive, he should never have demanded or asked anything from someone like him. He had lived countless millennia and understood things he had no idea about. However, he was lucky because he was one of the kindest anyone else at the same level would be, more than willing to kill him just for making eye contact. With that, the guy disappears into the thunder and rides off on the dragon. Meanwhile, poor Kim is there, not understanding anything that happened. The next day, the other friend was going to be taken. The protagonist asked a similar question. Here, I had no spiritual root, so why could she become a disciple? The old man shows a pill and says this item allows anyone to awaken their spiritual instincts. Even a mere mortal can have the chance to become powerful if they consume this item. All of this was great information for the CEO because now he knew there was a path beyond simple cultivation to become stronger. And in that, the old man explains it's possible for a mortal to train martial arts and gain the root of the 5 elements. However, this was a long path, and the results were quite mediocre. The truth is that what you gain from the pill is much better and much faster. This opens the portal and says that's enough. There's nothing to settle with either of them. And they were to disappear. The word friend shouts for both of them. However, the little jar opens an eye atop a tree. From afar, he can see the southern side of the Wangu region. Just like in the past life, it seems. He and King were going to spend some time navigating that region. However, our protagonist challenged countless people from all over this world. So he knows most of the paths like the back of his hand. With that, he woke the director and took him to the nearest city, explained the whole situation. And obviously, the guy was confused, but little by little he accepted the reality. Shortly after, they arrived at the city of Robiok. And there they sold those ascension herbs, but they only bought a small house. The protagonist has been teaching Kim the language of that world, the mountain destruction technique, which he himself created during the second regression, modifying an older technique. All of this to better suit Kim's own abilities. However, after practicing just a little, the master already starts feeling how demotivating it is. Kim reached the 3-flower level in 3 months of martial arts training, while he, who has practiced for 2 entire lifetimes, barely reached the 1st level. He gets up all excited and says he thinks now he can defeat the CEO. The protagonist smiles, thinking this really isn't the same Manhwa that he built as a brother in his past life. This guy was mentally hundreds of times younger than him. The truth is that, at this moment, the master is almost like a great-great-grandfather to Director Kim. In this life, he won't be able to keep up with this guy. He hands over a book and says that from this moment on, they will live separate lives. Kim finds it a bit confusing and wants to know what the master means. Did he do something wrong? What is the reason for them to separate? The reason for the protagonist is that, in the first regression, young Hussey became the leader of the Martial Alliance and ended up losing to those guys in the end. In the second regression, the truth is things weren't much different. He created more advanced techniques, practiced even more, and basically reached the limit of martial arts. However, he was unable to defeat those guys with martial arts and ended up abandoning it to focus on cultivation. He knows the same thing will happen to Yoon-hoon if he stays by his side his whole life. And to avoid seeing his desperate face again, he then says that, in this life, he will walk through these lands to improve his own skills. Kim, however, wants to know how he will live without his path nearby. The protagonist says that the martial skills he already possesses should be more than enough for him to strengthen himself. He already knows how to communicate. They should be more than enough for him to grow stronger. He already knows how to communicate. Writing and fighting. He was a martial artist at a martial peak. So, he didn't have to worry about anything. Kim says he understands. He didn't want to disconnect from the only person he knew from his homeland. The uncle says he understands. So, they make a promise every 2 years. On that exact day, they were going to meet at that house. And with that, after convincing the director, he left. It's the blue uncle. A human holding a spear tells him to stand still right there and asks what brings him to the Hall of the Eight Respected. The gentleman says he came to request a duel. However, the guy bursts out laughing, saying no one can just walk into this place and call out for a duel like that. But then, the gentleman strikes him with his sword. At that very second, the guy's spear tears apart. He asks the guy if he looked like just any random person, kid. The gentleman swears that in this life, he will do everything possible to become stronger. The tough guy is starting to take shape. Lorena, in her first life, went hungry. In the second, she went hungry again. But in this one, she'll probably go hungry. But at least she'll humiliate some guys around. Just arriving at the hall, a young girl from the street says the leader is waiting for him. Let's go through the little corridor. We arrive in front of the big boss. Looking around, the laughing uncle says he kept wondering who the visitor was that seemed to be a first-degree martial artist. He never imagined it would be a young man like him. The protagonist introduces himself and pays his respects to the hall leaders. The guy just says that it really seemed like he had formidable power, and the gentleman says the same to him. All he asks is to bless this inexperienced boy with some of the teachings. And with that, the old man pulls out a nunchaku with a sharp tip, while his rival prepares in the corner to unleash the blade strike. Then, the boss advances forward, spinning the nunchaku, saying that since he's going to stall, he'll go first. The weapon is covered in gold and goes straight for the young protagonist's eye. But he just pulls out the sword, slashes upward, and manages to redirect the attack. The Shaolin monks are all in shock. because he was able to reflect the leader's strike, who is now spinning like a helicopter in the arena, saying the boy has truly reached the level of becoming one with the sword. It seems he was about to advance his own first stage in the prologue. They say the leader seems to have become one with the sword as well. He learned a lot from that single move. The guy laughs and says it's funny that he's on the same level. Even though he's so young, the boy really was a genius. The protagonist, however, laughs at the word genius. In fact, he couldn't even see it as a compliment. Everyone looks at him thinking his martial prowess is impressive, something that would take decades for others to achieve. He got there before 30. So he thanks the leader for praising his still insufficient skills. But the man thinks, after all, he's still just one of the countless talentless people commonly found in this world. Yet, even without any martial talent, or being chosen by the heavens, he was able to develop this martial prowess. That now they call him a genius, truly. The regression, after all, was an opportunity, and since they want him to be, this time he will act like that genius. With that, he warns the leader that from this moment on, he will use the sword's energy. The guy thanks him and says it's fine. So he's going to take this seriously. Then, the man already unleashes the mountain destruction technique, the first form, and the leader dodges to the side. He attacks again with the second form, entering the mountain. The third form came ascending. The leader, however, activates the energy around the nunchaku, delivering a combo. The protagonist defends while the guy is trying to figure out what kind of damn kid this is who's not even 30 years old. And he had such a monstrous martial skill. Then, the protagonist steps to his side and activates the seventh form of the mountain's depth. One of the slashes seems to hit the boss's face. His eye twitches. Everyone is shocked, saying it's impossible. How is the leader being pressured by a kid this age? Meanwhile, the man is already executing the 12th form, forcing the boss to retreat while the guys in the audience say it's clearly not just about speed. The boy's sword carried an absurd power behind it. One of the attacks hits the nunchaku dead on. The boss trembles and looks terrified. At that moment, the man thinks it's time to end this. He jumps into the sky, activating the seven lights technique. Suddenly, a bunch of shining slashes appear. The nunchaku is torn apart. The boss is completely scared. The Shaolin is left speechless, and with that, the guy just falls to the ground and says he's lost. At the same instant, the man bows and thanks for the opportunity. The young man already turned and walked away. Everyone was left in shock. He walked through the middle of the dry land. Everyone watched, whispering and commenting. At least, he didn't suffer any ambush because of that. The House of the Eight Revered was an orthodox sect, so, they followed traditional methods, and the moral code, obviously, that's strict. However, in the unorthodox sects, basically the outlaws, the first goal in life was to travel everywhere and reach the martial peak on a mountain. The protagonist recounts that he ventured through countless medium-sized cities across the Seokyung region. Among them, he also lost in the EU Hyun sect and the Ryuan sect. He couldn't win there, but he did win in Gaedu and Wugwa. Now he's at the Roajing sect, cutting the captain in the purple cloak, who is pushed back, falling to the back of the hall. Unconscious, the old man laughs and says he must be the so-called first-class martial artist who's been challenging many places. He really is a skilled boy. The gentleman thanks him, saying that he has been learning a lot because of these fights. But then the lamp gang shows up, and the boss says he now has to face 10 elders all at once. The gentleman realizes how an unorthodox sect takes revenge. He then says he thought that duel had ended with his victory. He had never heard of consecutive duels, especially one where a person fights against 10. The boss laughs and says it's funny that he's never heard of something like that. The gentleman then replies that if other sects find out how they operate, the name of Hojang will be ruined. The boss, however, says what happened in that duel was that he suffered a small cut, and that cut got infected, and he died. Unfortunately, the sect took great care of the boy, who fought hard to survive, but no matter how much everyone did their best, he ended up dying, unfortunately. He, as a dead man, won't be able to deny anything. The gentleman is already surrounded, and sees that those bastards were crazier than he imagined. The boss says once again that his death here will allow their reputation to remain intact, but that's when the gentleman smiles, thinking that's exactly why he came to this place. He then says for them to attack. He will accept this ridiculous duel. Everyone advances while he thinks the moment has come to gain real combat experience. Oh boy. The scene shifts to night at a bar. Everyone is drinking and talking about the martial artist who challenged Roy Jang. It was a shame that such a talented boy died like that. The Mohawk guy said he was crazy too, challenging those outlaw guys like that. The white-haired guy laughs too, saying he was way too innocent. As if things always go the way you expect. Another guy, standing, says that everything the boy did, he was going to speed up his death because of all that arrogance. Hey John, it might have the name of a sect, but everyone knows that it's actually just a gang of criminals. It was a shame that, at this moment, the boy's body should have already been buried. However, someone steps into the hall. One of the waiters turns around to welcome him. Man, it's me, completely drenched in blood. All cut up, asking for a bucket of instant noodles. Please, the guy is all. You know what to say. Just tell him it's okay and ask him to come in. While the boss is out, the three fools are all there now, totally scared. Nobody says a word, but the truth is those bastards almost really killed him. It wasn't just 10 against 1. Their blades were also poisoned. The lucky thing is, during his time working in the high ranks of the Alliance, he managed to learn countless medical techniques. If he hadn't taken the healing pill at that moment, he really would have died in that room. And as soon as he killed the 10 elders, the old man shouted for everyone to kill him now, no matter the cost. All the Alliance members advanced in a battle formation. In the end, to survive, the man had to fight like an animal. But here he is, alive and calm at the bar. Right after stabbing the leader in the chest. He didn't kill everyone in the room, but cut their tendons, meaning no one will be able to come back for revenge, since they'll all be crippled for the rest of their lives. Not to mention, he noticed the chopsticks were shaking like crazy. He took so many stimulants that relaxing was impossible at that moment. Probably, with that amount, he won't even be able to sleep for the next few days. Maybe it was the perfect time to go challenge an orthodox sect, man. He finished eating, grabbed his sword, and walked out. From then on, the legend began to spread immediately after his victory against the Roijang sect. The young martial master ate a bowl of instant noodles and continued his journey. That insane event started spreading his name throughout the people. And a certain rumor began to spread through his kyung shortly after. People started calling him by the new martial title. The Infinite Fighting Spirit is Mi Hyun. His name even has a bit of swag, huh? Infinite Fighting Spirit. He goes around fighting, I'm okay. I respect the Pertinya. I know he doesn't have much talent. His goal is to reach the martial peak and go as far as possible. That's why he needs to keep fighting and fighting, each time challenging. More and more the boundary between life and death. For an ordinary man like him, to break through that talent wall, he would have to be crazy. Those without innate potential were forced to embrace madness. It was the only way a talentless man like him could achieve the power of a genius. And so, he went to countless regions of Wangu, fought dozens of duels every day against orthodox and unorthodox sects. 5 years passed. An explosion happens in the middle of a courtyard. The Pertapula activating. Once again, the mountain-destroying technique. At that moment, what was moving within him flowed smoothly, yet was extremely destructive at the same time. That technique was like the heart of the very sky. The sword's energy shaped in lines, something only those who reached the peak could use. Just trying to form it for a short moment. Left his mind utterly exhausted. However, if he couldn't achieve this, there was no way to reach his dreams. At that moment, a guy came from behind. He slashes with his sword. The Lord turns around, manages to block the attack. The energy shatters on the blade, and the entire place explodes. The poor guy is thrown against the wall, realizing that the sword's edge, which he struggled to maintain, was broken in an attack. Then, someone emerges from the smoke, saying they expected more from the so-called famous fighting spirit. Infinity fought, but this time, he won. Man, obviously it's that damn Director Kim. The strongest man under the heavens, the protagonist. He gets up realizing that this bastard really had incredible talent. He congratulates his friend and says he's definitely gotten much stronger. Since the last time they met, the elder notices that the damn guy had already gone through skeletal reconstruction in 5 years. Looking at his hand, he wonders what he's been doing all this time. He was still the same first-degree martial artist. Truly, lack of talent revealed the worst in people. Shortly after, the director said that after reaching the level of the 5 energies conversion, he realized something. He became the strongest man in Wango, and no one can withstand a single attack from him anymore. That's why, as the most powerful man, he was thinking of creating an organization and wanted to offer a seat. The elder, however, cuts in and says it's fine. He prefers to live as he has been, while remembering that this guy, in every lifetime, always gets obsessed with becoming the master of an alliance. But if he accepts that offer, he'll become vice leader. But in reality, he'll work more as a strategist. Something he already did in his entire past life and isn't interested in. That's because every single second he has to practice and reach the martial peak is too precious. After a lot of effort, the elder manages to refuse that organization deal. But then King starts insisting that, since he doesn't want to join the association, he should at least accept one-on-one lessons. However, the elder just replies that no matter what the director offers, he won't accept, and the reason is obvious. He's already learned everything possible from this guy in 2 lifetimes. What he really needs in this era is true experience. He remembers that in his past life, Yunho said that at the end of the first stage, you should face as many real battles as possible. And that's why in this life, he simply decided to watch his friend's saga from afar and continue alone his endless journey through battles. With that, 20 years passed. He arrives in front of the same house and says that this time he looks pale. At that moment, the master finally realized that his talent was truly that of someone abandoned by the heavens. Kim says that even training endlessly, he still couldn't improve his skill. The master says that his knowledge of blade energy surpasses any martial artist at his level. Yet he couldn't last more than 3 strikes against someone at the peak of martial arts. Kim scratches his chin, saying that's strange. He was almost one with the sword. How had he not reached the martial peak? Someone with so much experience like him should have achieved that easily. The master thinks, you already know this, right, boy? That's the limit of his talent. Someone truly abandoned by the heavens. Blood starts to trickle from his nose. He says he can only keep this technique activated for half a day. Maybe if he could maintain it all day long, he would finally find a path. However, he grabs a book, saying he wishes the best for him. That was all he learned. Fighting a cultivator for a short time, he did what he could to withstand some moves and escaped. In the end, barely, the master notices the thickness of the book. It really was as dense as many of the techniques they learned. And he questions if just escaping that person gave so much knowledge. Kim says they were walking natural disasters. And obviously you need deep knowledge to escape the force of nature. The master thanks him, saying he will preserve this and pass it on to the next generation. The master then says he will go out searching. After another fight like that, all he asks is that they meet again alive. He then said he would give a tip. To reach the martial peak, he had to keep every piece of spatial information present in his mind at all times. The elder was a bit confused and asked what he meant by that. He then commented on how he probably becomes aware of everything around him during a fight, like for example, where you can step what's behind you, where the other enemies are. However, he can only do that for a short time during certain parts of the fight. He needed to keep that active at all times. The elder was still confused, wondering how he was supposed to do something like that. Just keeping the sword energy technique activated seemed like it would tear his head apart. How could he simulate everything around him constantly? Basically, his head would definitely explode. However, what he assumed, he was sure there had to be a reason the strongest man under the heavens gave him that tip. From that day forward, he started trying to keep his awareness on all the information that his eyes and ears could pass, trying to remember the spatial position of everything he saw. His consciousness seemed to be navigating through the city. He could feel every person's footsteps, and with that, he was in the forest. It had been 5 years since he started practicing maintaining the sword energy and spatial awareness. However, every time he opened his eyes, he felt completely nauseous and dizzy. Not only was he absorbing all the visual information, but also every sound at all times. But how was he supposed to fight in a state like that, where he couldn't even look straight ahead? The problem was he didn't have many options. In the last 30 years, he had traveled through every medium and large city, and now there wasn't a single one he could visit occasionally. He was capturing some bandits and living off the reward money, having to fight sneaky enemies who used every kind of dirty trick. While he was completely dazed, a guy appeared from behind the bush and told the boss that he found the bastard. The guy placed the blade on his back, saying that today the kid would die. However, he himself was preparing, saying that even if he died, he would continue following this path. With that, 15 years passed. Surprised, he said that he really survived. King, with his face all cut up, said yes, once again he got out alive. It's been 45 years since he returned. Finally, he reached the stage he's at, proficient in remembering and processing not only what he hears, but also what he sees, and even what he touches, tastes, and smells. All of that at an advanced level. Yet still, he couldn't reach the peak of a martial artist. He frowned, wondering how that was possible. At that moment, King said that now he was being hunted by cultivators, and it seemed like they were even paying money to whoever killed him. Two already tried to set a trap, but he barely escaped. At least this time, he managed to leave a cut on one of their faces. The downcast man said that, apparently, he gained great knowledge once again. Kim, however, said that wasn't really the case. He just realized it's impossible to face a cultivator at the formation stage. If he doesn't escape as fast as possible, he'll end up a corpse instantly. That's why lately he's been thinking that maybe this idea of the 5 converging energies is the limit of a martial artist. And maybe the very author of the techniques he's been practicing came to the same conclusion as him. No matter what a mortal like him does, he'll never have a chance to beat a cultivator at that moment. Sayo saw himself in Kim. That guy in front of him was gifted by the heavens with incredible talent. While the protagonist had been abandoned, yet he still managed to realize their situations were very similar. It was funny to see this situation when they were completely opposite in that. He tells Kim that he is completely confused and doesn't know why he can't reach the next level. Kim apologizes and says it's strange because he can simulate sword energy, and even his 5 senses have already peaked. He has no idea why he hasn't advanced beyond that. He offers, as always, a duel. Maybe they could figure something out, since it's been a long time since they had practice like this under the moonlight. An explosion happens in the middle of the forest, and the master wonders what's wrong. Kim just says that really, he should have reached the peak of a martial artist years ago. The master then wants to know what that means, and why something like this is happening to him. Kim then says that even without talent, it should have already happened. Maybe what he needed was a catalyst. The master wants to know what he means by that. Kim explains it's a strong will or emotion, an event that makes him exceed natural limits and surpass the concentration and talent he has. The master, however, asks for patience and tells him to explain what the hell he means by that. In the last 50 years of his life, he has done nothing but fight with the most desperate. He would have to endure. He suffered his whole life desperately, trying to get out of this martial artist level and finally reach the peak. He activated all the energy his body has and even sleeps with the sword, keeping his energy active at that moment. He can process and memorize even any information he experiences. Inside his dreams, the master falls to the ground in despair, wanting to know why the heavens didn't show him the next step. At that moment, he knew how foolish a 70-year-old man looked, cursing the heavens for his fate. However, even having followed the path of the sword his whole life, he still had no idea what the next step was. Stage watching this, Kim makes some cuts on the sword and says he designed a martial art for him that will probably strengthen the points. Weak points he has at this moment. By no means would this guarantee anything. However, learning that might help him calm down. The kid, seeing the inscriptions on the tree, just says that once again he disappeared out of nowhere. And with that, 5 years passed. It's been over 50 years since he had regressed. And now he knows he doesn't have many years left to live. Looking up at the sky, he asks if Young Rum had already died. Apparently, once again, that was the fate of the two. His talent ends here. And just like Young Hoon, he wasn't able to do what he wanted. No matter how many mortals suffer, they never escape the fate of the heavens. However, right on time, someone appears behind asking, "What the hell is he talking about? Damn, he's done for no arms." Immediately, the old man approaches, asking what happened, why he looks so beaten up. He says he's going to get some medicine, but at the same second, the 5th one flies out with him, grabbing him from behind. Whoa, man. Now I realize, right? He's being taken away. But the guy doesn't even have an arm, right? How is he holding on? However, Kim tells him to take a look and sees they're being chased by a cultivator. That was the price he was paying for having blown off someone else's arm. Kim, however, is excited, saying that Yanhun managed to make a cultivator suffer enough damage to be hunted like this. He finally glimpsed the stage that exists after the conversion of the 5 energies. Finally, with his own eyes, he knows the limit of a martial artist. Then, a ball of energy appears above, and he says he risked it for this, spending his own life force to reach this point. Zio realizes that it was a strengthened key and immediately sends out this energy attack, saying he managed to destroy an arm of a cultivator. Thanks to that, the energy ball hit the house, destroying half of the forest. He tells the Lord to watch. This was the result of his lifetime of practicing martial arts. Ah, the silver. However, for a second, it was there, saying this is the house he built after saving money for 50 years. What, however, he is telling him to look at. He fled to this place, specifically for his friend to see all this, because he wants to leave his legacy in the CEO's hands. At that moment, the CEO began to get angry. However, he decided to stay quiet and just watch this martial performance. The 3-story house he built after so long was destroyed without leaving a single trace. Lucky he didn't have any servants, otherwise they would have all died instantly. Besides that, it was noticeable that in every part of the building, countless cuts had been marked. The so-called energy ball was actually a concentration of countless blades. It really was an unbelievable force and much stronger than any martial art Kim had ever shown. Kim is fleeing, saying that's how he managed to destroy the guy's arm. Before, he had to set ambushes and try to attack them lethally just to have a chance. However, now he could fight them face to face, but speaking of which, the energy runs out and the two start to fall. Another explosion in the forest. All the trees destroyed while Kim agonizes on the ground, telling him not to forget these techniques. They were his life's achievements. And what he wants is for them to be passed on to the next generations. The Lord said he understood and told him to be quiet because his life was at stake. That's when someone up in the tree suddenly says he finally found the damn final form martial master. It was a shame he had fled to such a bad place. He then tells the civilian that this guy was a criminal who committed countless crimes against the cultivators. So it was best to leave him there. The gentleman asks if the guy is there to oppose. And the dude just wants to know if by any chance they were allies at the same moment. However, the silver one starts running with someone on his back. The guy from afar, seeing this, just says it's insignificant. He should have already learned the strength that his friend possesses. But since that's how it is, he's going to take this as entertainment, tells the guy to run as fast as he can. The purple energy spreads, and when the gentleman looks back, there are a bunch of zombies, corpses of other dead guys. The protagonist keeps running, thinking he's too old for something like this. Meanwhile, the badass, says the friend, has been given the name of a final martial master. It really was something quite unique. The friend with that name, and he with the name of the infinite fighting spirit, being chased by those zombies. It really was a weird situation. He keeps fleeing, telling the friend to wake up and say something. At that moment, one of the zombies is about to get close, wearing some really modern clothes, but then takes a cut to the neck and falls toward the others. The gentleman kept fleeing, saying it was the damn king who should be carrying him on his back. With that, the escape continued, and as expected, the zombies kept chasing him without stopping. The protagonist persevered and kept running. Tomorrow would be over. The night passed, and he no longer even knows how many times the sun rose and set, but now he's at the top of a mountain, saying it really was higher than he expected. At that moment, the guy on his back said it's scary. A mere civilian managed to resist this chase for 3 days and 3 nights. But there's no way he can run anymore. Anything he tries will be futile, especially since the final martial master was already dead. The gentleman said, that's obvious, especially since he's a doctor. The cultivator wants to know why he kept running then. He was only interested in the final martial spirit. He doesn't care about him. He could simply having abandoned that corpse and fled, sir. However, he laughs, which leaves the guy confused. Silver thinks he really went far with the countless techniques he had learned. A lifetime of practice, even though the heavens denied him any kind of talent. Of course, a big part of his power come from Yonghong's teachings, someone from his homeland, and his martial mentor. At that, he draws his sword and says that if the guy wants to take his friend's head, he'll have to rip it off first. The guy loses patience and says that really no one feared cultivators anymore. Apparently, it was because he either abandoned that life or was too old, but it's okay. He was going to show he had enough power to cause pain. Far worse than death. Suddenly, 2 arms advance beside the CEO and latch onto Kim. He looks back, a bit confused, and the guy replies that they are parasites, and now will pay the price for trying to humiliate a cultivator. The protagonist just turns around and says that he really was an evil bastard, while the guy orders the martial spirit to kill his own disciple, who shouts and delivers the first cut at the crouching man, turns to the enemy and asks how he has the nerve to destroy the legacy of a man like that. The guy, however, is just smiling while Kim keeps attacking. The Lord thinks that at least it was clear he wasn't able to use martial arts. He was simply using the pure power that the cultivator put into him with those arms. However, this strength and speed were absurd. Too much for him to resist with this old body. He's all trembling, saying it was already a terrible disgrace to have to point his sword at Kim, someone who is already dead in the end. He apologizes while thinking that, unfortunately, there's nothing he can do, and he needs to end this as quickly as possible. So, he activates the mountain cut technique. 21st of the celestial sky, in a flashback. He asked Kim if he knew why this mountain technique was the only one named after a lake and not a mountain. The truth is, well, it was Kim himself who created it. So, Our guy is curious to know if that, by any chance, had some special meaning. He falls backward and says Celestial Lake. It reminds him of the top lake at Mount Bike. Apparently, it's a region in Korea where they came from, and Kim thinks that whoever created this technique might have come from Korea just like them. That's when Kim realized the technique was named that because it was a lake that reflected the sky itself and the surrounding mountains. The lake reflects what happens in the skies. However, its surface remains untouched. The skies meant everything he had been learning, and the lake reflecting the skies was the meaning behind this unique attack. Kim seems to take a body manual for a second, and the master explains that this is a technique that, for a short period, allows him to use the enemy's energy in his own strike. This was a very unique move and a martial art built only for him. If one body remains intact, it will continue to be used like a zombie, and that's why he has to make sure no piece of it stays alive. He will accumulate all the energy in the sword's sheath, combine all the techniques, and form it all into a single attack. When he is about to finally unleash the attack, suddenly Kim begins to transform, turning into a ball of flesh. The silver realizes that the damn cultivator had given Kim more power and speed. He knew his life was about to end soon, so he was going to use that moment to make sure his master didn't suffer that humiliation. At that moment, he charges towards King, who raises his arms. Meanwhile, the protagonist swears to himself that he still couldn't die. The area around him, the sounds and smells, the humidity and the temperature. He absorbs every sensation around him, even if his brain was about to explode. Then his eye starts to burn, and he says he would turn everything to ashes. However, suddenly, he feels something strange and stops for a second. His brain, which seemed ready to explode, instead of giving in to all the pressure, seemed to have surpassed something, seeing himself in a void. He wonders if he fell into some kind of illusion or if he's completely lost his mind. But then he notices some strange red lines. Coming from Kim's hand, the attack hits the ground squarely. However, he manages to dodge, noticing that even his sword now had a strange blue line. He simply follows the path of the line, and the slash will hit Kim's chest. At that moment, he wonders if that was the vision of a martial artist who had reached the peak. And he notices that, strangely, Kim was smiling, the person blessed with talent by the heavens, and himself with talent banished from the heavens. They were polar opposites, yet, in a way, they were similar, because, in the end, both had suffered their whole lives trying to escape the destiny granted by the heavens. And man, he cut Kim into about 50 pieces while saying that at that moment. There was no longer genius or fool. They were just two men who had suffered against fate all their lives. One had died, and the other was already at death's door. Kim looks back, and he realizes it was as if his friend was asking if he was really going to stop there. At that moment, he says no and charges forward, destroying the entire mountain. When all the smoke rises, he is sure that now the end has truly come. The cultivator looks at him, shouting with hatred as he prepares to attack, and says that not even that guy could punish his corpse in death. Then he asks that his martial master rest in peace. And with that, he finally reached the martial arts level he had desired for so long, and put an end to this life of endless effort. That was the fourth regression, man. This fourth life was insane, the best so far. Will it keep getting better? I don't know, but I'll know in the next chapter. We're back where all always begins. He stares at his own hand and realizes he's back. In the past life, he fought from the first day until the very last second, and finally managed to conquer. He shouts, saying that he finally reached the martial peak, the feat he had wished for all his life. At that moment, with that guy from the beginning there, poor guy was coming to hit him, the damn INJO, asking what the crazy guy is yelling about and saying it's his fault. However, the protagonist sees the strange red line aiming at his face. He ducks with his eyes closed while the guy asks what he thinks he's doing, but even without looking, he could perfectly see where Myeonrum wanted to attack. In a past life, he was also able to dodge this guy's attacks with his eyes closed, but it was something different. He was predicting the trajectory of the attacks, future ones, and understanding this guy's patterns, all attributed to decades of martial arts. But now it's something completely different. It was like having some kind of future vision. And even with his eyes closed, he had total understanding of where this guy was and what he was doing. That's why they say no matter how many first-level martial artists exist, They will never beat a martial master. He can fully see the trajectory of any attack from anyone weaker than him. Obviously, someone below this level didn't stand a chance at all. And now, instinctively, he could see countless openings toward Manhwa. Each of the lines represented trajectories, and the positions where he could strike, the red lines, allowed him to read the opponent's attacks. Probably, it was because the gap between him and Manhwa was extremely vast, that he could see so many openings. However, after a brief analysis, his nose started bleeding and his brain was burning, as he wondered if this was the price of this technique. Manhwa threw another punch, calling him son of A, who almost killed everyone. However, the protagonist just gave him a nanu, and he collapsed hard on the ground. The old man was there holding his head, while Kim asked what he was doing. The duck was there agonizing from his nose, while one of the girls wanted to know if he was hurt, if he was okay. He was amazed that the pain was so intense just from using it briefly on someone as weak as Manhwa. The usual sequence followed. He calmed everyone down and took them to the cave and cooked some fruit. They slept around the campfire, and night fell. Outside, I was practicing, even cutting a leaf with a stick, all without needing to use talca to strengthen the stick. Now, he noticed that red is the movement prediction, while blue is the path to the target. Using this technique, he could see the movement of any opponent, or even anything that exists. Now, it was clear what the king meant. By the memory of all 5 senses, the friend made him strengthen his vision and everything else, so that eventually, he could calculate the trajectory of opponents from the tip of the stick. He could see how to destroy each of those leaves. Truly, martial vision was incredible at this. He stared at the moon. He focuses for a second, and when he opens his eyes, there are a bunch of guys attacking him. In 1 second, with a single move, he sees the blue line on all of them and passes through, attacking and destroying each one. The sun was already rising, and he was overjoyed, saying he had finally reached the martial peak. Obviously, even so, his head was still about to explode, all because he was fighting against leaves. Right after that, he grabbed the 8 bamboo roots and started practicing with them, strengthening his body. He is already able to maintain the vision for at least 3 hours. In this life, he is strong enough to do whatever he wants with everyone, especially since he doesn't have to sell anything, because he can make money just with martial power. Back in the cave, he's taking a look at King. This guy passed 6 volumes of everything he had found to him, and he even managed to see the final teachings before he died. This was all knowledge he had to pass to Kim for sure. Kim is a rum of this life and the next one to come, which also means that what Kim is going to teach him this time will be even more distant than he imagines. He has no idea how he will reach the next stage, but unlike his co-workers, there's nothing he can do but train endlessly, keep practicing the vision technique, and make his mind get used to it. The first goal in this life was to feel no pain at all when using this technique, and then finally reach the level of the 3 flowers. Man, that's the level Kim usually reaches after 3 years of training, right? My God, what an unfair life. The protagonist, however, says that finally, he will live like someone at the pinnacle of the martial world. The next morning came, and, as always, the fox, who is the forest master, arrived in this life to collect her price. The gentleman stretches out his arm, and at that moment, he becomes curious to know how many red lines he would have. If he took a look at the fox, however, one stare from her actually reveals a wave of red shock. He gets a bit confused. He understood what happened, and the fox bites his arm immediately. Even though his arm was being bitten, he was more curious about how his entire vision had turned red. A few days later, the floaters arrived again, and once again he was startled. No matter where he looked, all he saw was a stream of red energy spreading. This was the difference between a martial artist and a cultivator that everyone talked about. There was absolutely no opening. Truly, the most powerful martial artist would struggle, just like the weakest cultivator. A few days later, he decided to ask the seam master something. He humbly introduces himself and says he's curious about something. Rule wants to know what it is, and the protagonist tells him about what he saw, a strange sphere of red energy around the guys who came before him. Rule explains that those men possess a kind of consciousness. Some even said it was like a divine power. The simple explanation is that while a mortal's consciousness stays trapped in their head, a cultivator's can engulf the surrounding area. And he leaves saying that, as a spiritual being, He also has this ability and tells the boy that his curiosity should be satisfied. Since they spoke in the regional language, the one who hadn't learned anything was completely confused. Shortly after Rule left, the old hunchback appeared, took the girl, and kicked them out once again. But strangely, this time they fell into the middle of the water. The gentleman is twisting his shirt, wondering why. This time it was completely different. What comes out of the water? All crooked, wondering where they are, because the gentleman only replies that it's a place completely different, looking around. He knows this is Wanghua Lake, and the city of Zhangguo must be nearby. Who cares, right? What are they going to do? Where will they find a person? They need to find at least one base. There's something like that to look for direction. Then, the portal tells him to take a look over in the corner on the other side of the lake. You could see there was a small town, so they would probably find what they needed to know there before anyone could agree. It was Mr. Japlanagua who told him to wait there. While swimming, he wonders why he twisted his clothes. However, the most important thing is that if memory serves, that place was a hub for several bandits. He went there to clean those guys out. In his past life, the leader of those guys was in the final stages of the first rank, while the vice leader was still in the middle of the first stage. The rest of the crew were all small fry. However, there were many, so he poisoned his sword to handle it easily, and one of the bandits was looking aside, asking, "What the hell was this, Patinia?" The kid suddenly coming out of the water. The prototype keeps advancing while the guy tells him to stay still if he doesn't want to die. However, before the man could do anything, the kid already came at him with a wooden stick. The prototype, however, charges forward, hitting the guy with a shoulder check, sending him straight to the ground. Then he grabs the guy's wooden stick, points it at the other, and says it's good to tell him how many people he's already killed. The tough guy says he's a son of A, and warns he's killed 50. As he's about to finish speaking, the man already cut off his head. The guys are all scared. Got in the teeth, while Patinia said that from now on, anyone who had killed a person was to come at him. In another part of the bandits' base, some women are serving something to the guys. The guys are all ordering the sluts to obey, when suddenly one of them stops and asks, "What the hell is going on outside?" Suddenly, the door opens, and there's the man holding someone's head. Then, the boss, without leaving the throne, just say there's a little rat in the base. Everyone was supposed to draw their weapons. So the sir only speaks here in this room, and won't ask anything, since everyone will die shortly after, and the entire base is covered in bodies. And the boss is there, lying on the ground, begging for mercy, sir. However, he only wants to know how long he's been there. The boss said he arrived 15 minutes ago. That's right, sir thinks that in his past life, it took him a whole day. He had to set the place on fire, use poison, and it was extremely difficult. But now he managed to finish everything with a stick. In 15 minutes, the boss tells him to wait, saying he can show where the treasure is, but the protagonist just cuts off his head, saying he already knows very well. After all, he's taken this before. Then he opens some cages, and everyone who is imprisoned there is freed, and thanks him for taking revenge on the bandits. One in front humbly asks him to reveal what his title is in this martial world. They will make sure to repay this debt one day. The sir stays there thinking, right? What's the title? And he says, as always, boy. The infinite fighting spirit, boy. The title fits, you see, because the boy fell into the water, immediately started swimming, and finished off the bandits. With that, the protagonist went with Director Kim to the city of Shango, bought the identification plates, and also a house for both of them with the bandits' money. After that, he, as always, taught martial arts and writing to Kim. 2 months later, there he was, reaching the level of the 3 petals. The sir realizes that the more he learns, the faster Kim is also managing to evolve, as always. Notice that I try to make him want to give up, but he's felt that way forever. For him, it takes a lifetime to reach the martial peak, while Kim simply skips all the stages and reaches the pinnacle. The protagonist congratulates his friend, saying it's amazing he reached this level. Even before understanding how to read properly, Kim says he's also surprised to think he had such good martial talent. The gentleman is now thoughtful. He has never had a real duel with Kim. The moment he reaches the 3-flower level, that's because this guy is always trying to teach more than actually duel. But how would a duel be now that he has reached the martial peak? Or Kim, a rum that just reached the 3-flower level. At that moment, he offers a duel to his friend, who says it sounds good. Maybe now he has a chance to beat the boy. Back in the forest, the protagonist sends a slash tearing across the entire ground. But from midair, he launches a sequence of attacks from the mountain dragon's peak, and the red lines appear. The duck manages to see that the better he gets, the fewer blue lines he has, and the more red ones appear. He needed to keep dodging, but at this pace, he would never create an opening. For some strange reason, A strange desire to win began burning in his heart. At that moment, he understood that it was the last time he would have a chance to beat Kim in this reincarnation. This guy will keep evolving at a terrifying speed, and the next time they face off, he won't even be able to dream of beating him. The pro has been playing defensively, knowing that at this moment, just after reaching the three-petal stage, it's the only time he can win in this life. So he decides it's time to go all out. He pulls some things from his finger and sends them in his direction. The other is surprised, but manages to defend. The pilot realizes that at least he interrupted the rhythm of the guy's moves and decides to show that he's ahead. In the combat experience, the sword plunges into the ground, and he sends a devastating barrage. Okay, seeing this. However, he smiles, saying he'll have to show him the power of the three-flower stage. The protagonist at that moment felt that some danger was approaching. Then, he throws the sword upwards, activating a strengthened kid blade, and sends a slash in the CEO's direction. He knew he would be torn in half if he tried to face that attack head-on. However, the mountain-destroying technique he learned was taught by King himself. But King, who had already reached the level of the 5 transformations, sent out the Echo Valley, and an explosion swept over the forest, smoke everywhere. You could see the horse's hairs floating, and he said the boy really is amazing. The protagonist, however, is shocked that this bastard really existed. His attack at that moment, the blade falls to the ground, and he said he gives up. It's King who gave up, saying his weapon broke. He really was a disgrace. As a martial artist, he has to admit, the old man was very experienced. The protagonist, however, tells him not to worry. He will never be able to win again, and with that, man, he just accepts the reality of his life. With today's fight, it marks the last day he will be stronger. Then Kim, until the next life. Damn, that's really harsh, huh? Dude, he just reincarnated, man, and already knows that soon his friend will be unreachable. It's obvious, but the protagonist, because his friend reached the peak of the 3 flowers, prepared a gift. King responds that the duel was already an incredible gift, but the old man brings a bunch of books, saying these are the scriptures of someone who reached close to cultivation and surpassed martial arts. He bought them from an old man in the city who said that to reach this level, a person has to be at least at the 3 flowers. The protagonist skimmed through them, but unfortunately, he couldn't understand anything. So, well, he will leave it in his friend's hands. Kim thanks him, saying that if that's the case, he will definitely dedicate himself after learning to read. Lin started dedicating himself to these studies. For months later, the old man comes in excited, saying he brought some money and managed to hunt a good guy today. However, strangely, the books were lying on the floor, open. The old man is a bit confused, because he couldn't feel his friend's presence, who suddenly appears out of thin air. Giving the protagonist a scare, the friend explains that he learned the techniques. In those structures, the powers that surpassed martial arts. He's impressed that the Lord couldn't locate him either. Truly, these martial arts were incredible for the protagonist. But he's scared. He remembers that strange technique from when someone visited him, though normally he only showed that ability when he reached the power of the 5 energies converging at the center. But how is he already using it if only 1 year has passed since the regression? Then, the friend says that if the martial master couldn't perceive it, he probably can kill anyone. The young lord is really tough on the boy. Even knowing this would happen, that it would keep evolving, talent was something hard to accept. Then, the friend says he's decided to travel the lands for combat experience and invites the lord to come along. The protagonist, however, says he's not really into it. He believes he should focus on stabilizing his understanding of the martial peak. Kim becomes thoughtful and says it makes sense, especially since he's still learning to use the blade line. The protagonist, angrily, says yes, and besides that, he's interested in the imperial regime. He wants a position in the government, and maybe the time will come when he can help Kim, and with that, temporarily, they each went their own way. But obviously the Lord had other reasons to want to enter the imperial regime. From the information he gathered in the military alliance, the imperial family was closer to the cultivators than any other organization. Many even say that the main Wongo family was actually just collateral branches related to the cultivators themselves. And that's why he enlisted in the Wongo military. They readily accepted him, since he already had some fame for hunting bandits in large numbers. With the power he had already developed, he easily became a general. With that, he applied to be an imperial guard and passed with ease. He's all dressed in black, with that slick swag and everything. He achieved that with only 5 years of regression. A guy said his role was to risk his life to protect his majesty. And a martial artist at the peak could definitely do that. The Lord beats his chest and says you can count on him with that. He started to be part of the Imperial Palace Shadow Guards. He was assigned a post as soon as he learned techniques to hide, his breathing and espionage skills. And on the day he met the Emperor, he discovered something truly surprising. The Emperor himself was a cultivator. Holy crap. He looks crazy. That's instantly obvious. Because he had the awareness of a cultivator, and now he knows that guy was a dam, born with a spiritual root. Moreover, the protagonist's slightest doubts were shattered. When he met the rest of the Emperor's family, most were cultivators, with consciousness levels that rivaled his own. One thing he notices, though, is that these guys didn't seem to be at a very high level. No one came close to that fox. At least you could see they had a faint aura of consciousness around them. They were probably in the early refining realms, obviously. The Emperor's consciousness was much broader and more distant than all those guys with that power. He was stronger than all the Shadow Guards combined. The truth is he, as a Shadow Guard, exists only because the Emperor is too lazy to kill assassins himself. Obviously, that guy was the one they try to kill the most. And the Empire people come to try to kill him every night and get our little dish, tearing another one in half, at least. It was good that he was gaining some experience that way. 5 years passed while he served an empire as part of the Shadow Group. In the meantime, Kim became the leader of the Martial Alliance, and now, as a Shadow member, he couldn't find a person who was the leader of the Alliance. So, usually they met secretly and drank together. That's when he started noticing something interesting. The red lines had always been the best path someone could follow to battle, and now Kim was exuding countless lines from countless angles. It was almost as if there was no place around Kim that he hadn't secured with them. He noticed that what was around Kim felt very familiar. In fact, it reminded him of a cultivator's awareness. It was a shame, it was almost incomprehensible to him. If only he had reached the stage of the 3 flowers, he could already understand a bit of it. However, there wasn't much he could do. All he could do was continue observing Kim's current condition to try to understand how one day he might get there. He had no idea exactly what Kim was doing, but he felt maybe this was the path to mastering the sword. At that moment, Kim began to absorb the air. That's when he went through the so-called skeletal transformation, also known as plastic surgery. Right, man? I think the Chinese invented that so when someone gets surgery, they can say, no surgery, man. I went through skeletal transformation, just so you know. One congratulates him, saying he looks much younger. Kim agrees. Finally, he reached the point of converting 5 energies into the core. It was just a pity for the boy, because if he had one level higher, he would have learned much more from it. Silver agrees, saying he thought the same, but it's his own fault for having such mediocre skills. A little later, in the forest, the gentleman asks if his friend has ever met any cultivators. He said yes about that. The gentleman says that the domain around the friend was very similar to the consciousness of those guys. Could there be some connection between that? King says yes, near that region he possesses. He can face a cultivator at the refining stage. Probably humans who manage to reach the level of the convergence of the 5 energies achieve something like that. The protagonist realizes it's interesting. There was a chance for a martial artist to actually defeat a cultivator, just like the difference between a first-degree martial artist and someone who reached the martial peak is extremely vast, almost incomprehensible. The same must happen with Kim's next levels, increasingly. He won't be able to understand what's happening with his friend. However, maybe today's experience will help him one day also reach those convergences of the 5 energies. With that, their conversation ended, and sometime later, Kim returned to work. A few days later, while he was working as a guard, he saw an assassin moving on the upper part of the palace. At that moment, he felt a red line coming toward him. He knew this guy was at the martial peak. The sword came, but he easily managed to defend himself, seeing the way the person fought. It was someone who had only just reached the martial peak. The guy lunged toward the gentleman, who easily deflected all the attacks. He had been very thoughtful lately. He should have been focused on this fight. But the image of Kim at that moment, having evolved, wouldn't leave his mind. He wondered if that had to do with the sword's energy. The aura on his blade proved he was already evolving in that aspect, or at least reaching the intermediate stage of first degree. This happens the moment you reach the martial peak, because as long as the sword is following the best path, she always carries an aura with blue lines. It's always the best possible path that the art of the sword seeks. Basically, it maximizes his potential to the fullest. based on what he's learned recently. The martial sword arts and the blade energy are really the same thing. However, he soon thinks that doesn't make sense, because if that were really true when his friend turned into a zombie, he should have kept using the blade aura, but that didn't happen. This leads him to conclude that something human must be behind the attack, and he realizes it might be the intention of the martial artist executing the strike. The red and blue lines are not just an attack, but also the intentions of the artist wielding the sword. The moment he reached this conclusion, he felt something strange holding the sword. It was as if veins and arteries were coming out of the sword and entering his arm. The assassin advances once again to try to kill him, but the master sends a slash in his direction, apparently breaking through, because blood gushed out and the girl was thrown far away. My God. The poor girl spun around like a Beyblade. Meanwhile, the protector is just there thinking this isn't the end. If he kept feeding the sword with his intentions, he could advance even faster. The poor girl is kind of looking around, not understanding what's happening, while the protagonist is in his monologue. He also realizes he finally managed to make this something real after 10 years practicing as a master at the martial peak. He finally learned the silk of the sword, or the sword's line. With that, he had reached the intermediate levels of the peak. The sock remains lying on the ground as he slowly approaches, and he notices a familiar face. She was one of the servants, who had recently been hired. He comments that her reaching the martial peak so young is impressive. If she had survived, she might have had enough talent to reach the 3 flowers, the girl. However, from the ground, they only ask if he is the so-called spirit of the infinite fight. The protagonist is confused because she knew that name 10 years ago. When he saved those guys, he earned that title. However, in the city of Wangu, they called him the monster of the infinite fight. Then, the girl says that her brother is much more talented than she was, but it was all the damned emperor's fault, who only replies that appealing to emotions won't help at all. The rule here is to kill any assassin who has entered this place. At that moment, the rest of the guard arrive shouting, saying there's an assassin here. The girl keeps telling the protagonist that he is disobeying the emperor's orders. They cut her off saying that, unfortunately, just listening to an assassin is a crime itself, so he has to finish this now. Man, who thought the girl would last in this life? I think she'll appear in the next ones, but in this one she had 2 minutes of screen time. After feeling disappointed for having destroyed someone with so much talent, the protagonist got rid of the body with the rest of the guards. The commotion was huge. However, until now, the emperor hasn't left his room for a second. Besides, at the door, he had applied a silence technique. It was more than clear that the emperor didn't care if people knew he was a cultivator, especially since all the shadow guards already know this. The minimum to become a guard was to reach the martial peak, and at that point, you can already see the cultivator's aura with your own eyes. However, everyone there keeps protecting, since that's the job they were given. Strangely, recently, the number of murders has been increasing a lot, which is strange, because Yongu has been going through a period of extreme prosperity. Obviously, there were still people in poverty, but it was no longer necessary for everyone to become bandits or something like that. So, who is so eager for the emperor to be killed? And because someone from Wangu who knows his title commented on it, he turns around thinking it's a good time to find out everything he has. Especially since, on the other hand, he is more interested in the cultivators than in the assassins because of that. 10 years have passed, and the protagonist has gained enough confidence from the emperor to be his worker, to have the authority to take a look at more information from the imperial family. Of course, he couldn't look at the biggest secrets. However, now he could look at documents and find clues about the cultivators. Oh man, talking about the silver one girl, that's messed up calling the little beard. And it seems he finally found the location of the cultivators. The problem is it was taking too long and wasn't as easy as he imagined. The place where he was much better than when he was just an alliance strategist. And thanks to the experience he gains every night and how much he can observe people, maybe he really reaches the level of the 3 mysterious flowers. He decides to take a look at the sense of things and says that in year 33, it seems that the number of orphans decrease a lot because of his majesty. And also, as a result, this reduced the arrival of bandits. The protagonist finds this information kind of weird. It was too simple for a government document. Besides, the most important thing was leaving out how the number of beggars in the city decreased. Did they all starve and die? But if so many people really died, at the same time, he would have known in his past life. And it doesn't say anything about them rising out of poverty or about the emperor, helping them find a better way to earn money. It only says they disappeared. The protagonist remembers the girl from 10 years ago, who said people were dying at the hands of the emperor. However, he finds it strange. The current emperor wasn't a bad guy. In terms of ability, he wasn't the best leader of all. But at least it was average, then. Where did all those people who were erased end up? If it's something not even recorded in official documents, that means it's something related to the cultivators. Any missing information is always connected to them. Maybe he needs to investigate this more deeply. Later, with Kim's help, the scene shifts to the Murim Alliance. At King's retirement ceremony, many looked sad and disappointed. However, King seemed happy. That's because he only retires once he has learned the 6 levels of the cultivation scriptures. In other words, it's time for him to hunt those guys. The protagonist opens the door and says he looks pretty happy. Who turns around saying he thought he was an assassin, but he's a friend. Really, his aura has been changing more and more. And now he really reminds him of an assassin. That's true. Huh? Will the little Proto change a lot emotionally? You know now, like, he's getting crueler, killing everyone. I saw on the cover of this story here, there's a picture of him all in black, looking sharp, forming that little blood aura. Right? So you can already see that. The little Proto shares a bit about the information he got while working for the government. He's clearly a spy, since it involved the cultivators. Obviously, Kim got very interested. The Lord said he would go over all the regions where the cultivators reside, and he was going to ask him to gather information, and with that together, they started trying to understand more about the cultivators. One night, sometime later, a soldier reports that the North Gate is secure. The Lord noticed that lately the frequency of assassins had also decreased. The enemies couldn't keep sending assassins to the Marshall Peak constantly like that. However, in the memory where he thinks this, there's a blaze happening in front of him and a man burning. Someone warns that assassins have arrived and are at the East Gate. A guy is holding a talisman, asking if everyone there is at the Marshall Peak. Damn, man, he's an enemy of gravity, so they're screwed. And the guy says this vision technique is a curse because it stops him from arriving secretly. The worst part is the old man guessed what happened. This time they sent a cultivator as an assassin. The white-haired old man in front tells everyone to get ready. Meanwhile, the talisman guy says it's funny that they think they have any chance to win. They might think they have some chance against someone at the first level. However, he was already at the second. With that, the aura starts spreading, along with the talismans burning. And he said today he was going to kill everyone there and kill those bastards from a secondary family of the Mackle clan. With that, everyone starts burning in the hall, agonizing while the guy laughs. But then we find out, look who's there. The badass thread intact, the cultivator, is impressed he survived that attack. I say for filthy insect. His look is pretty arrogant for someone who just blocked an attack. Nothing more, but from above things are getting intense. However, the next chapter starts with a sword breaking. Actually, it's a guy launching an attack, realizing there's a barrier around the palace and no one can get in. The talisman is blocking everything, meaning they already know some cultivator is involved. This time, they would need more troops. Inside, everyone is on the ground agonizing, while explosions are happening back and forth. The old man is rushing, cutting everywhere, saying he can't stop for a second. He needed to evolve his sword from blade silk to the strengthened form. The cardinal talisman, however, is just laughing, asking how many times he's going to have to repeat. It's impossible for him to break this barrier with the power he has. The old man's attack hits the barrier head-on while the guy laughs. However, the energies begin to clash and the barrier starts to crack. Because of that, the guy managed to fold the barrier and push the other guy backward. The problem for the old man is that he's trying to keep this technique activated, which he barely understands how to use, and at the same moment, he's thrown far away. Before the guys could do anything, the talisman guy, charges forward and stomps him right in the middle of the back, wanting to know how a low-life creature had the nerve to cut him like that. He was planning to toy with the kid before killing the rest of the bastards in this place. However, he changed his mind. He's going to impale him on spikes until he's completely unrecognizable. The rest of the friends try to get up, calling for the vice leader who rushes into the attack, but they all get pierced too, and the guy just turns around and warns them not to interrupt him. At that moment, all of them were insects, with no chance of winning, so it was best they realized their fate would end under his foot. The guys obviously want to advance, but they're all hesitating. I don't blame the poor guys. It's a certain death. While the old man on the ground realizes he's screwed. This time his entire body inside is destroyed, talisman full. However, Smash Hand asks if he's still alive and wants to know how long this insect will hold on. The old man just thinks that he really wasn't any different from an insect. The talent he has, the skills he possesses, and the life he leads, all of it truly represented the useless life of an insect. The talisman cat looks a bit confused and asks what he's talking about. He's asking to keep him alive, but the old man is there, thinking that he's trained for ages and everything he's lived through hasn't vanished. He starts to raise his hand, his whole life destroyed, while thinking he realized. The moment this guy used hiding techniques, he had so much talent that he never trained his own body, or knew how to fight considering the correct distance from the enemies. He is merely someone born with enough talent to have been blessed by the heavens and become a cultivator. He could lose to that bastard and could die facing off against that guy, but completely destroyed. He grabs the guy's clothes, saying he won't accept that with everything he's been through, all the effort he's put into this life, wasn't enough to reach a higher stage. That bastard wasn't going to be the person to make him give up. So he shouts, saying that even the effort of an insect carries some meaning. The thistle talisman falls to the ground. Confused, he tells the bastard to let go of his hand. However, at the same time, he's a bit confused with his nose bleeding. The elder realizes the poison has started to work, the temporary technique he forced to break that barrier was just to, for a moment, create a chance to cause a cut and poison this guy. The cultivator is there, starting to bleed from his eye and nose, saying he has to neutralize this. However, the elder approaches asking if he really thinks he's going to let something like this happen. Now, he's going to taste the bite of the insect he wanted to humiliate. Then, he covers the guy's mouth because most detox powers require incantations. He restrains his hand to prevent the guy from using any kind of seal to neutralize the poison and, meanwhile, tells the bastard to try doing something. The rest of the people around tell him to try to help the elder. At the same time, outside, the talisman begins to break and the people start invading the castle. Shortly after, the protege is being taken away, saying that the bastard called him an insect but died. Not much different from a dude. The protege killed a cultivator, man. Crazy talk, man. I didn't expect that one, huh? Damn, kill the first one. You're crazy, man. Now I'm eager to see how this will affect his life. In the next chapter, he sees a lot of smoke in front of him. He wakes up next to the doctor, who asks if it's really okay to keep smoking, right? Around a patient, who replies that tobacco is an extremely healthy herb and would improve his health. For some reason, I thought he was going to wake up next to a hot female doctor, right? Because every story is like that. But no, this one is real life, guys. He woke up next to the old man, and that's what he's got. And then he wonders, why the hell does this guy think tobacco is good for you? That's when he remembers it's ancient times. The guy says that His Majesty assigned an imperial doctor to him, so he should be grateful for all this generosity right now. The old man notices that his body really felt light. This guy was extremely skilled. Makes you want to learn all his methods. The guy said the person who healed him warned that his arm could recover, but it would never be the same as before. He still needed plenty of rest, so it was best not to overexert himself. The protagonist remembers that. That cultivator completely crushed his arm. Obviously, it wouldn't be intact. And then he replies that he's already happy to be able to use it in some way. Looking at a blue box, the guy also says that the emperor was impressed by the boy's willpower and gave him a reward. Unfortunately, the emperor himself can't deliver anything to the shadow soldiers, so this guy kind of has to hand it over to him. That's why the guy makes a speech, saying that in the name of His Majesty, the vice guard of the shadow leaders, his heir, risked his life to defend the throne, and for that, he is granted a void pill. Upon opening it, he saw a strange red pill, and the guy says it seems to be a key, essential for building the persons. Something about the refining stages before cultivation, but the old man has no exact idea what this means. The Lord watches. He knows that it is a pill made from the remnants of a real key-building pill, from a time when he worked as a doctor. He also made some elixirs. Every time an election is held, there are some leftovers that could be used to make something a bit inferior. Basically, the essence of that item had already been lost. Wow, Placia realizes that the emperor probably doesn't even think that most people have this knowledge. The effect will be so minimal that it serves more as a hangover cure. He never imagined the emperor would be so selfish to this extent. The old man, however, says that from what he's heard around, whoever consumes this item is immortal and manages to extend their life by 10 years. The Lord is surprised, and it didn't seem to make any sense. However, the old man really seemed quite interested in the item, even though he obviously can't steal something given by the emperor. The Lord then thanks him and says he will use the pill. As soon as his energy stabilizes, the guy leaves, telling him not to forget the Majesty's kindness. However, the Lord thinks he will actually keep it for a long time. He won't eat it now, when he has plenty of energy left, but rather when he is about to die, to see if it really can extend his lifespan. Now, the scoundrel is excited, saying that working for the Empire really brings many benefits. Living 10 years longer was something grand, since with that he would evolve even more in this life. It really was the right choice to join the Imperial Guard, and he is feeling good about what will happen in this life. Hey, boy, I feel it won't be quite like that. You're too happy, my friend. The fun is over, boy. The sword rolls on the ground, and he looks at his completely destroyed hand. The body had been fully healed. However, now every time he holds the sword, at that very moment, a sharp pain strikes his arm. He ends up letting go. He can't even use the 24 basic mountain techniques. And now he's already wondering if this marks the end of his martial arts life. However, he tells himself no, the life on the martial path has always been full of suffering. So what if? Now, he has to add a bit of pain to that journey. Pain has always followed him like a shadow, so this pain won't be what makes him give up. In fact, he will use this opportunity to further enhance his prowess, and with that, 10 years have passed, 30 in total. From this regression, he got used to using the sword, and his skill in controlling the blade's silk also improved. Moreover, he's becoming increasingly skilled at using hidden weapons, since he works as a shadow. Also, King has recently been sending some letters, warning that the secret of the cultivators was about to be uncovered. These guys live in places hidden from the rest of the world, with barriers that make their locations completely invisible and inaccessible. Weaker cultivators do create, yes, mansions among mortals. However, the truly powerful live within those barriers. It's said that certain normal humans live with the cultivators. This is because these guys obviously need slaves and servants to do whatever they want. And according to what King has been studying, it seems that those responsible for sending assassins to kill the emperor are all from the cultivator clan. They recruit mortals within their domain and train them to become peak assassins. And now he's beginning to understand the situation. The poor who disappear were probably sent to these guys. They are raised from childhood to work as assassins, or simply as slaves to these people, and considering them as assassins. They are being sent to kill the emperor. It's probably some kind of clan dispute. However, even with all this knowledge, now is not the time for him to focus on that, but rather to focus on martial arts. Yet, right at that moment, Kim shows up asking, what's he muttering about? The Lord explains that he just finished reading the letter, and Kim says he sent it a month ago. It really took a long time to arrive. He says he came to visit because he discovered something extremely frightening. The Lord wants to know. However, Kim says they first have to remove this suspicious magic. Then he explains that there were two cultivator clans. In the Wangu region, the Maklik clan, which currently is the family dominating everything, and the old imperial clan that ruled, known as the Jin clan, for many decades. These two clans have been secretly fighting each other over the nation's resources, and the Maklik finally managed to expel the Jin from the region, who lost power hundreds of years ago. The moment Maklik took control of the city, obviously the Jin clan lost much of its members and significance. That's why these guys have been even training mortals to become assassins. The Lord replies that he already knew all this because of a letter. So, who said the important part comes now? How does he think the Jin clan was able to create so many mortals who reached the martial peak? It was almost like they had a factory, and with that, he explains that most people who reach the mortal peak are accepting vengeful spirits from their own family. This instantly pulls all the life force and willpower, besides pushing their natural talent to the maximum limit. Confucius himself asks if the Jin clan is killing family members to use as vengeful spirits. However, Kim explains that they are not. Actually, it's the current regime that killed the families. Of all these people, the protagonist doesn't seem to understand. And that explains why this current clan, the Makli, has been kidnapping orphans, beggars, and all kinds of poor farmers to turn them into elite warriors using the innate energy. They steal from people's lives. They create pills that extend their lifespan. And, obviously, to gather as many people like them as possible. Churs, they kidnap the base of society. You said this was basically a form of cannibalism because Kim said so. He's right. These guys are literally eating humans. You can't believe these guys aren't demon-rooted. So, why are they doing something like this? In theory, Cultivators are those guys who follow Taoist principles. Their intention was to ascend to the heavens. So, why would they be doing something like this on Earth? Then, he remembers the girl who warned that people were dying at the hands of the emperor. However, he had also dedicated his entire life to protecting those bastards. In the end, he had also killed countless innocent people with his own hands. Kim then says that, while investigating the McKean clan, he was hired by the cultivators of the Jin clan, and they offered an opportunity to attack this clan of those guys, and he decided to join. They could no longer allow those human-consuming trash to stay alive. If they're as evil as that, they couldn't keep controlling this nation. He has been going through countless martial artists, looking for masters to join this cause, and asks Su to join him. If the Jin clan recovers the throne, things will at least be better than those damn Mockley clan, who are consuming everyone. You wonder if in that life, when he died for the cultivators, the real reason behind all this was this story. And even so, for this stupid cause, he has been wasting his life, and with that, he says it's okay. He's going to take part in this too. He left the palace with someone that day to join the forces planning to attack the Empire's cultivators. That's why they arrive at the pavilion in Sukyung City, where all the top martial artists of Wangu had gathered. There were the elders of the 4 stars, and even the 3 demons. All the masters from the best sects in the region were truly present. Everyone there had reached the martial peak, and even had 10 martial masters who had reached the 3 flowers level. If it weren't for the existence of the cultivators, these guys alone could conquer the entire empire. One of the old men, however, wants to know why they brought a guy who works for the government. They can't trust someone so close to the emperor. And the other looks on and agrees, saying he doesn't trust anyone associated with the government. Hey, Pertinia, take a deep breath and shouts, "That emperor, man." The guys all stand there, damn. That kid's crazy. Then he keeps cursing, saying that guy is a bastard, and the old man says here, "See, they trust that the boy doesn't like the emperor." The old man just wipes his face, saying it's a shame because he still had a lot to say about this. The martial masters accepted him, and they set off together to destroy a demon base. Oh, get there. He sees a group with the red-haired guy staring there, saying their strength isn't bad at all. However, what surprises the Lord is that these guys were wearing the same kind of clothing as that talisman guy, meaning the guy he killed really was a cultivator from the Din clan. Kim tells the red-haired guy that he kept his promise and brought everyone who agreed. He hopes they can accept this help to kill those bastards. The man just replies yes. Everyone was supposed to get ready to leave. Then the Lord asked where and what he was going to do, and asked him to follow. They then arrived in front of a cemetery there, full of bodies, everyone there had been killed by the hands of the Clay clan. He recovered as many bodies as he could to at least make some graves. The Lord asked if he did all of that alone. However, Kim just activated a magic from the path of the heavens and said that the souls of everyone there were filled with vengeance for having been killed by those damned ones. And to allow them to depart, he learned some spells that showed the way for them. It was good. I will never forget that not all power used by a cultivator is something disgusting and cruel. The important thing is how that strength is used. And that's why keeping your heart human at all times was as important as continuing to get stronger. The Lord was there somewhat speechless. And a friend says the time to leave has come. Elsewhere on the mountain, someone joins their fingers and says they will open the path to the clan's entrance. With that, the forest landscape suddenly transforms into a castle. The Lord is completely confused. The view around changed entirely. But at the same time, Arthur smells a horrible stench of blood and rotten corpses. From the walls, someone shouts that intruders have arrived. And it was the damned Clandio clan who finally attacked. Suddenly, a barrier rises, protecting the entire place. The red-haired chief said that, as always, their skill in protection was excellent. Then, Kim steps forward, and the Ketchuru from the back wants to know who this mortal is that is going ahead of everyone. He's acting like he has some kind of permission. The chief, however, says he may be immortal, but he is special, and they know it's hard to believe. However, in terms of prowess, they were on equal footing. Then, one begins to concentrate energy in his hand. Dude, look out for the Rasengan coming. And the protector remembers that this was that same explosion that destroyed his house. The energies converging at the origin, and with that, the attack. The leader with the barrier sweeping through the entire place. The Mackley clan members are all scared, mouths agape. And the barrier forms a crater from which a bunch of zombies start coming out of the gates. At the same moment, the chief shouts to get past those creatures and enter the castles. The Lord moves forward, cutting through everything, while the Mackley clan members are terrified, saying those damn guys really brought top martial artists in numbers. They would need reinforcements. However, the protagonist recognizes those damn zombies. Those familiar clothes, that damn guy from before who made that bunch of zombies, did that with what truly belonged to the Mackley clan, which he finds strange. However, there were lines of attention visible on the zombies. But zombies were supposed to be creatures without wills. So what was happening? Maybe the will of the cultivators controlling those zombies. But that wouldn't make sense either. That's when he notices a guy on the battlefield, with an aura around him and the zombies kind of protecting him. Judging by the size of his consciousness, he realizes that this guy was still in the first stage of refinement. Man, he advanced with sheer guts and cut the barrier of the human who took a cut on the forehead and was already poisoned. The guy is begging to be spared there, while the Lord ordered him to explain what that was. Damn, next to him there was a cauldron and a vast number of bodies. The guy said he would explain everything. This was the first refinement process. They extract the blood and mortal bodies to create the first part of the origin formation. Then, they deliver the so-called origin, which is this pot with concentrated power. To the superiors, they take this to some other place, where they complete the rest of the process, mixing this origin blood with the fifth refinement, when the alchemy is performed on thousands of mortals. The regeneration pill is finally completed, and if the boy really wants, he can even deliver this part of the origin blood that he had finished. It was only the first stage, but it was worth many lives. The Lord, however, just thanks and says that now. He has no reason to hesitate to kill anyone there. However, suddenly, a halberd comes flying towards him, and the Lord ends up letting the guy go. Then he turns around, asking what the squad leader is doing there, but the guy tells him to shut up. Damn, man, it's the rest of the Shadow crew, saying he better get ready. Oh boy. Soon, the rest of the guys there, the Shadow friends who worked with him before, my guy already tells him to be quiet, saying he doesn't talk to traitors. The camera zooms in on a house, and the Lord asks, "Are you calling me a traitor? Squad leader by any chance? You know the Imperial family has been committing." The boss advances, saying he does know and slashes at him. However, the Lord manages to dodge. Then he asks, "If you know, how do you have the courage to swear loyalty to them? What kind of human would do something like that?" The guy keeps attacking, saying, "We are the Emperor's arms and legs. We don't think for ourselves, we just move according to his will." The Lord replies that the guy is an idiot. To the Emperor, they are just ordinary people and nothing more than cattle. But then the boss kicks him in the stomach and pushes him away. The Lord realizes that this bastard's skills have improved even more. He was about to reach the peak of the 3 flowers. Then the boss asks, "Do you think your side is any different? Tell me, what's the big difference with the clan you joined?" He's about to say something, but the guy cuts him off, saying no. They're also ascetics. They also see ordinary people as insects. The scale of importance they give to humans is exactly the same. No matter how different the methods are, in the end, they would also grind down the citizens of this empire to get what they want. And maybe even prove worse than those who are ruling now, man. But here I have to disagree. How can those guys be worse than someone who kills everyone, thousands of citizens, just to strike at the cauldron and make a pill? And at that moment, a sequence of red lines appears coming toward him. He realizes he won't be able to block it. However, in the middle of the guy's body, he now sees a strange purple color. What was that glow, Master? Then he says it doesn't matter if one side is better or worse. He will choose to remain loyal to the side he already belonged to. With that, he launches an attack with the halberd while the Master prepares himself. He sees that he's strengthened and knows this guy wants to end it. In the next attack, seeing that this is the guy's conviction, he uses the echoing valley mountain slash technique. The energy expands, cutting across the entire battlefield. The old man is startled. The Master stands there, saying he will honor the opponent's determination. Unfortunately, he only has one technique that can block this empowered attack head-on. The bad part is he can't control the power properly. Damn. He said he can't control it, but destroyed the old man's arm, who suddenly starts praising him, saying, "No matter how many times I see your swordsmanship, Master, it remains incredible." Out of nowhere, a compliment, and our protagonist steps closer, saying, "My technique is far from refined. I'm just an ordinary guy, old man." But he falls to the ground. The guy wants to compliment, and the Master has to accept. "Far from refined, Master. That technique you used is amazing. It's about to reach the awakening of the 3 flowers. It was the most wonderful form I've ever seen in my entire life. I've been striving since my martial awakening to reach the level of the 3 flowers. But when I finally saw the peak, I realized it was just the low level. For any ascetic, that's when I realized that what I've been practicing my whole life would never even come close to cultivators. I learned that I devoted my entire life to nothing, so I kept searching for a path to justify it. Until now, the old man is a joke. Falls to the ground, saying it's just a pity that they carry different destinies. Are you crazy, son? Not even the girlfriend praises him as much as this old man does. He's a young man. Too bad he's on the wrong team. He won't switch now after a lifetime. At the 45-second mark of the time, or not, right? We have to see what's the vibe with this Jim family. Also, Sir is standing there silently, with his back turned. So speak up. Why didn't you interfere in this fight? Surrounded on all sides, he wants to know, especially since if they had interfered, the squad leader would have survived. He would be the one lying on the ground, when the man replies. That was the squad leader's request, you see, leader? He said if we used everyone, you would use poison weapons. And what he wanted was a duel of pure martial strength. Do you find it strange they still call him vice leader? And those guys puff out their chests, saying that once a commander, always a commander, and once they swore loyalty to the majesty, it remains eternal, you answer. Apparently, you intend to keep this loyalty to the emperor. He speaks up and apologizes, saying that if that's the case, they'll have to kill everyone there. Oh, it's all forming up now. They're all alone. I'm away from the city. Explosions everywhere, guys being thrown far away, and the one ordering everyone to advance, warning that the mission is to destroy the Calamically refining furnace. The team keeps pushing forward. Sucker getting a cut on the neck, while at the top of the air there are some Mona Lisa, who look more like witches, everyone with their magical talismans, casting a rain of fire. The soldier's world is wondering, where the hell are the reinforcements? Where's that idiot from that family? Meanwhile, back with Siofi, a blade is sliced and another soldier is falling. The protector, however, is already getting exhausted too. The soldiers see the needle in the armor and know they're about to be paralyzed because of it. He asks the Lord why he chose such a difficult path. Actually, he chose the hard path. Because he didn't kill anyone, he paralyzed everyone. And the guy wants to know, you could have killed everyone here without even getting hurt. So why did you prefer to immobilize us and end up taking damage? The Lord answers, because you still call me the vice leader. The guy's kind of shocked by that. Falls face first to the ground, saying that until the end, he was an interesting man. What he wants to know is if he finally managed to reach the 3 flowers. The Lord sheathes his sword, saying that, unfortunately, he hasn't reached that level yet. He's just starting to understand how it works. The truth is he saw that 3rd color, a strange purple line, but he can only see it inconsistently. Maybe he needs one more long life of fighting and dying. Then a guy on the rooftop shouts, saying, amazing, your skills have reached that level. That's why my father sent me. The Lord recognizes him as Prince Macri, a man who says it's been a long time since they last met, Crown Prince. If you've been watching from the start, why didn't you interfere? The guy laughs and says, if I had interfered, it wouldn't have been as fun. Besides, don't call me Crown Prince. Here today, I'm just a representative of the clan's reinforcements. Macri is confused. If I accidentally call you Prince, do you think watching your guards die is fun? Idiot Macri. The prince loses his temper, saying, I already told you not to call me Prince. But since you insist, let me tell you something. Do you know how I became a crown prince? At that moment, the Lord is startled. The guy's aura starts spreading. Damn, son, a cultivator like that. Because the thing is filling the entire panel, and he says he's reached the Refiro stage. At a young age, just like his father, no matter what the meaning of self-growth is. Or at most, he could face someone at the 3rd level. That is, how could someone who would have been defeated by him when he was young possibly win now? Besides, it was funny that he thought he needed some guards. Sir, you realize this guy is strong. Even martial masters who have mastered the 3 blossoms would have to risk their lives to fight this monster. The problem is, I haven't even reached that level yet. If I fight him, I'm sure I'll die. But why does a smile form on my face? The reason is obvious. It's because I'm not afraid of death. That means getting closer to understanding these lines, how important death is. If someone can awaken at dawn, then it's okay to die at dusk. That's what that guy taught him while fighting 50 people. In my past life, I never understood this teaching, but now I'm finally starting to comprehend it. The prince is a hostage. I don't believe you're advancing with the certainty of death. See, squad leader, you're dumber than I thought. The protagonist, however, jumps. Now you see he will understand the difference between martial prowess and a cultivator. He sends a black slash toward the prince, saying today he would push martial arts to the limit. From the prince's point of view, he sees the lord jumping, a black mist appearing on the sword, and, in an instant, he disappears. He is confused, wondering where this guy went. We see here a little earlier, the Lord finally understood what the scriptures were on how to reach the peak of celestial martial arts. He had already memorized everything. However, until today, he could barely understand a single line. He could even perform, but he couldn't comprehend. But at that moment, when he saw the strange purple line, for a second it seemed he understood what the exhaustion of martial arts meant. The book said, if a martial exchange is a collision of colors, maybe the color itself can be attacked. This was one of the phrases the master never managed to understand until finally he came close to grasping the peak of the three flowers. And now finally everything makes sense, the idea behind that color and its meaning. It goes far beyond different martial arts, it seems, to be cutting the prince's aura of consciousness, and in that, he understands that the meaning lies in cutting the very perception an opponent has of you. The prince is still there, right? Wondering where he is, while now, the protagonist understood why he couldn't find Yanru. He vanished like a ghost because he could cut the perception CO had of him. This was a martial art that allowed a martial artist to stand face to face with a cultivator. This was the technique created to surpass the heavens. At this point, the blade is at the prince's neck, but it seems to have collided with an aura. Mackley is confused and wants to know what trick he used. While the protagonist tries to understand, it seemed like he was hitting armor around the guy's body. Suddenly, he is pushed away, exploding onto the ground in a move from a prince. Who says these cheap little tricks are fun, but enough? He was nothing compared to a true cultivator. The tornado expands in front of a master who knows he has to dodge this one. From within it, other wind blades come flying, while he retreats, but everything around is being completely torn and destroyed. The master knows he won't be able to get close. 1 centimeter because these wind blades are lethal. Not to mention that even if he manages to get close to the body, he needs to know how he's going to get past that strange defense. At least dodging was easy, as long as he stayed away from the comprehension zone. The problem is cultivators use spiritual energy, so the Lord will be exhausted long before that guy. He couldn't take much longer. He had to finish this as quickly as possible. He needed to evolve to the peak of the three flowers. Right here and now, the prince's expression changed to confusion. Seeing the Lord, he asks, "What do you think you're doing? You look exhausted already." Another wind blade comes flying, but the silver activates the mountain cut technique and slices it in half. The prince is baffled how that's possible. Meanwhile, the Lord notices his arm and sword are hurting like hell, but it would be impossible for him to fight retreating now. Then, another dozen blades come, and man, she activated the greatest technique I've ever seen in my life. Or it was a sequence. It was the joyful landscape painting of mountains and peaks rising to the summit of the rugged cliff stone. But this is no longer just a technique. Man, it's literally a whole poem in the middle of the fight. And she's there launching attack after attack, saying she can't stop, no matter if her body ends up destroyed like an old rag. A clip, but she's still there, and all Naruto style throwing multiple jutsus. Wondering how she has the guts to act like that. Suddenly, a gigantic mouth appears in the middle of the tornado, and the guy orders her to die now. The Lord immediately knows there's no way to dodge this. The instincts were telling him he'd die instantly the moment that thing touched him. However, at that moment, he wasn't worried at all. He would unconsciously follow the path of the purple line, while wondering what purple means. Blue is the line of protection. It's what originates from him. Red is the line of will that comes from the enemy's attack. Then, he begins to realize maybe the purple was both the defense and the attack, along with the hatred and the intention to intervene against him. The creature steps forward. Now he understands. He always imagined the opponent saw red, but from the guy's perspective, obviously everything is reversed. What is blue to him is red to the enemy. And vice versa. It was all just a matter of perspective. In the end, all the lines had the same color. A martial art can't be complete on its own. It needs its enemy to make any sense. The level at which he could understand a reflection of himself in his opponent, now he was grasping what the peak of the three flowers was all about. By understanding how the enemy, he begins to realize he had been wasting it foolishly. The sword gang was a technique he could barely whole for a second when putting all his effort into it. And now it's clear, a martial art isn't performed only with one's own strength. The perception of the opponent and the world is what truly completes it. And with that, he activates the mountain-destroying technique, the final form. The cut goes straight toward the desert lizard, right at its mouth. Smoke rises everywhere. Meanwhile, the guards who had been paralyzed watched the Lord's fight. Everyone knew the outcome of this battle. His resistance was irrelevant. An ordinary man fighting a cultivator, a martial artist, had no chance against an immortal being, yet the guards couldn't believe what they were seeing. The Lord appeared with the 3 flowers of the peak awakened. Then he takes a deep breath and realizes all the energy he had wasted was returning to him. The Mackle wants to understand what he thinks he's doing, but the Lord Father only tells His Majesty to prepare. The prince performs a bunch more jutsu, telling him to stop getting excited. Just because he broke a single spell, he wants to see him go through this. Suddenly, more desert dragons appear. But at that moment when the Lord advances, he no longer felt that any of those creatures had the power to kill him. Now that he reached the level of the 3 flowers, he realized that the peak transcendence and the mountain martial cut were parts of the same martial art. The dragons keep advancing while he now combines the mountain that transcends the peak. He is literally flying there at the hour of the tiger, activating the peak light transcendence. Towards the macaque trying to defend itself, he unleashes another explosion in the Lord's direction, saying he is a mere mortal and should stop with those ridiculous tricks. Dreaming he could surpass this cyclone, the nearly invisible Lord amidst it all realized that this cultivation technique was a concentration of thousands of spinning wind blades. But he manages to see something. He activates 2 more techniques, mountain destruction and landscape painting, and now notices he can defend against those strange blades. Akita is standing there, not understanding what he is doing, while footsteps approach with a lightsaber, saying now. He understands why he couldn't break through those defensive techniques, but what came from the sword was completely different. And man, he lashes the Mackle's neck. The cultivator bleeds, tries to cover the wound, and sends another explosion forward, but the Lord just reflects it and stands still, while the Mackle holds his throat, telling him not to come closer. He sends another explosion, a sequence of blades, and tries to escape. The Lord, however, is behind him, warning he won't let him escape today. And wow, man, he cuts him in half. Completely. Only the upper torso falls to the ground. And the cultivator doesn't give up. He turns confused. Want to know how a mere mortal could do something like that? He tells him not to come closer, to stop thinking what he's doing is right. Do you think the Clandio is very different, or do you really think the cultivators of the Gene Clan? Do you think the Clandio is very different, or do you really believe that the cultivators of the Gene Clan? He reached the stage where they haven't consumed any pills made by mortals. You better remember that my father gave you an empty pill. A few years ago, if you had taken it until today, you wouldn't be any different. Man, the gentleman is humiliating him. He grabs the pill and destroys it. He tells him not to worry. He doesn't intend to consume anything made by those disgusting cultivators. A little clit there, mouth open, saying nothing. And the gentleman waves goodbye. He's going in for the cut. However, another blade comes and the cut passes over the gentleman's head. Oh, guys, that was way too good, right? He wonders why his body is upside down. At that moment, he realizes, I was decapitated. This isn't an attack that someone at the beginning of cultivation could pull off. It has to be something that drastically surpasses that. Only an advanced stage cultivator, or Yan Hak, who has already reached the peak of the 5 energies, could perform something like this. He starts having a flashback of all the lives he's lived. From the first to this one, he saw a scene of Yoon killing a cultivator, and celebrating that he finally killed a guy at this stage. Finally, a martial artist managed to stand toe-to-toe with these guys while the gentleman thinks. A long time ago, our second life ended in an instant. I taught Yong-hun and saw him surpass the cultivators. That made me start hoping that one day I would defeat the cultivators. However, that day soon collapsed. That day, I couldn't do anything, he repeats to himself that he just needed to be stronger and try even harder. And maybe he would have gone further. Well, the head is on the ground. While he tells himself that now that he has reached this level, He can't let himself die like this, without doing anything more. This wasn't the time. He needed to kill that guy. Man, you lost your mind. I don't think this is going to work. But I admire the endless motivation. Meanwhile, Maka is staring at a talisman on his chest, saying he survived. An item his father gave him, extremely rare and single-use. It creates an attack from a cultivator at the key construction level. He laughs, saying, "Mortal, I won." Yet he's face-to-face there, without legs, while the protagonist is headless. The gentleman wonders if cultivators really win in the end. Every time it was AU. He celebrates finally killing the first cultivator. However, it doesn't appear before him, saying there are many more. He's just a confused mere mortal. And AU doesn't understand why there were more than 50 of those guys in front of him. The truth is, no matter how unparalleled he was under the heavens, even if he was the strongest martial artist who defeated a cultivator, in these guys' realm, there were many more in number. At the key construction stage, they say there are more cultivators than stars in the sky. Man, the zoom on the gentleman's hand shows a small movement, while Mackley's there saying, "Damn it, I used all my energy, for mortals." It was like an endless wall, a path that can't be crossed. And at that moment, he almost gave up. He was so overwhelmed by it that he wished to never learn martial arts again, just become a soap salesman. Yet once again, he never gave up. He sees a flashback of Yoru saying, "I'm going to stop these guys, but you have to stay alive through this." The gentleman's headless body starts moving little by little, driven by pure determination. A clip asks, how is it possible? How can a mere mortal carry such a pure, well, that makes no sense. He is sacrificing himself for him. He shouldn't be fighting those guys. However, Yunho looks back and says he saw Seo pushing himself endlessly until now. He is talking to Su, whom he knows, inevitably, he will see a better tomorrow. With that, he delivers the final strike in a cleave. Su is Hyun, who is made of flesh and bone, and practiced martial arts his entire life. His hand, which lasted decades, held this sword. To the point of destroying the martial art he had refined all his life. The body that accomplished all this and carried this burden stood firm even after the Lord's death at that moment. As he was dying, Mackley was overwhelmed by disbelief and fear. Even decapitated, the Lord was smiling. And with that, this life of eternal bodily refinement came to an end. He sees Yoren saying, "That was a good cut. You need to keep going because your effort will never betray you. You must carry the mindset that it's okay to die at dusk, so you can reach further at dawn." In other words, never forget, your efforts will eventually bring you a new day worthy of the sweat you shed. And that was the Lord's fifth regression, me and A. Crew from the heavens. That was insane, right? For God's sake, damn. What masterpiece, huh, bro? We finished the first season. And this one, absolute peak. Absolute cinema. Guys, you're crazy. What can I say, right? Guys, we ended with a life lesson too. You're crazy. So, I'd already narrated this work up to chapter 22. The video was ready. And then, when I checked, bam, the last chapters came out. I said, "Oh no, now I have to narrate. I have to finish before releasing it, bro." So that's it, guys. What else can I say? But some great works are coming. Lately, they've been dropping some real gems, huh? Crazy stuff. Bro, so to not miss the next ones coming up, what are you gonna do? You activate it. I don't know. Let's go.